What if consciousness itself is the greatest tragedy of existence? Imagine for a moment that you possess a mystical device, an ancient artifact that grants you the power to fundamentally alter the nature of all sentient beings. With a single decision, you could remove consciousness from every living creature, returning all life to a state of pure instinctual existence. No more self-awareness, no more existential dread, no more understanding of mortality. Just the simple, unquestioning flow of life. Would you do it? This question lies at the heart of the consciousness paradox, one of the most controversial debates in contemporary philosophy. It challenges our most basic assumptions about what makes life valuable and forces us to confront uncomfortable truths about the nature of awareness itself. Some philosophers, like Dr. Elena Vasilescu of the Institute for Consciousness Studies in Prague, argue that consciousness, our ability to think, reflect, and understand our own existence, is the source of humanity's deepest suffering. Consider the unique burden of human awareness. We alone, among all known beings, must carry the weight of knowing our own mortality. We must grapple with questions of meaning, purpose, and the apparent absurdity of existence. Every joy we experience is shadowed by our understanding of its impermanence. Every relationship we form is haunted by the knowledge of inevitable loss. This awareness, Vasilescu argues, creates a form of suffering that far outweighs its benefits. But the implications of consciousness go beyond individual suffering. Professor Marcus Chen, in his controversial work, The Conscious Catastrophe, suggests that consciousness itself may be an evolutionary mistake, a cosmic accident that has led humanity down a path of unprecedented destruction. Our self-awareness, he argues, has given us the tools to dominate and reshape our environment, but also the capacity for cruelty, manipulation, and systematic violence on a scale no other species has achieved. The consciousness paradox becomes even more complex when we consider the role of awareness in moral behavior. Traditional philosophy has long held that consciousness is necessary for ethical decision-making and moral responsibility. But what if this assumption is backward? What if our very awareness of good and evil, right and wrong, creates the conditions for moral suffering? A tiger killing its prey feels no moral conflict, no ethical distress. It simply acts according to its nature. Humans, burdened with consciousness, must constantly wrestle with the moral implications of their choices. Dr. Yuki Tanaka, a leading researcher in cognitive neuroscience at the Tokyo Institute for Mind Studies, presents perhaps the most radical perspective. She suggests that consciousness might be an evolutionary dead end, a grand experiment of nature that has ultimately proven more harmful than beneficial. Her research indicates that conscious awareness, particularly human-level consciousness, may be fundamentally incompatible with psychological well-being. The more aware we become, the more we suffer. This brings us back to our mystical device and its profound choice. Removing consciousness wouldn't end life. Plants, animals, and even humans would continue to exist, but without the burden of self-awareness. They would live, reproduce, and even experience sensations, but without the weight of knowing, without the curse of understanding. Some argue this would be the greatest act of compassion possible, ending millennia of existential suffering in an instant. Others view it as the ultimate horror, the erasure of what makes life meaningful and worthwhile. As we delve deeper into the most controversial ideas in philosophy, we'll explore how consciousness shapes our experience of reality, questions the value of awareness itself, and challenges our most fundamental assumptions about what it means to be alive. We'll examine radical perspectives that dare to ask whether being awake to our own existence is a gift or a curse, and whether the ability to contemplate these questions is itself part of the problem. The journey ahead will challenge everything you think you know about consciousness, existence, and the nature of reality itself. It will force you to confront uncomfortable truths about what it means to be aware, and whether the gift of consciousness might actually be the greatest burden any species could bear. The idea that consciousness might be a cosmic mistake leads us to an even more unsettling question. What if reality itself is consciousness's greatest deception? Consider the possibility that every sensation, every thought, every moment of your existence is not just interpreted by consciousness, but fundamentally distorted by it. This is the foundation of perceptual illusion theory, a revolutionary framework proposed by Dr. Ramesh Kapoor at the Global Institute for Reality Studies. According to Kapoor's research, human consciousness acts as a filter that doesn't just process reality. It actively creates a version of reality that may bear little resemblance to what actually exists. Think about how a dream feels completely real while you're in it. Your conscious mind constructs an entire world, complete with sensations, emotions, and even complex narratives. What if our waking reality is simply a more sophisticated version of the same process? This theory gained unexpected support from quantum physicist Dr. Sarah Mackenzie's groundbreaking experiments at the Quantum Consciousness Laboratory in Edinburgh. Her team discovered that conscious observation doesn't just influence quantum particles. It might actually bring certain aspects of reality into existence. This suggests that consciousness isn't just observing the world. It's actively participating in its creation, moment by moment. The implications are staggering. If consciousness creates our experience of reality, then everything we know, everything we believe to be true, might be nothing more than an elaborate construction of our awareness. The colors we see, the sounds we hear, the very concept of time and space, all might be artifacts of consciousness rather than features of objective reality. Professor Ahmed al-Rashid, a controversial figure in cognitive philosophy, takes this idea even further. In his seminal work, The Conscious Conspiracy, he argues that consciousness evolved not to reveal reality, but to hide it. He suggests that what we experience as reality is actually a sophisticated defense mechanism, a way for our minds to shield us from something far more terrifying: the true nature of existence. Consider the implications of al-Rashid's theory. Every time you open your eyes, every time you think you're perceiving the world around you, you're actually experiencing a carefully constructed illusion, one designed to protect you from whatever lies beyond the veil of consciousness. This protection, he argues, comes at a terrible cost: eternal separation from what he calls raw reality. The theory becomes even more disturbing when we consider recent findings from the Meridian Institute for Advanced Cognition. Dr. Isabella Santos and her team have documented what they call consciousness glitches, moments when the carefully constructed illusion of reality seems to break down. These glitches manifest as unexplainable experiences, time distortions, or sudden, overwhelming sensations that reality isn't what it seems. But perhaps the most chilling aspect of perceptual illusion theory is its implication for human relationships. If consciousness constructs our reality, then every interaction, every relationship, every moment of connection with another person is filtered through multiple layers of illusion. We're not just failing to see reality, we're failing to truly see each other. Dr. Viktor Petrov, a renegade neuroscientist from the Moscow Center for Consciousness Studies, suggests that genuine human connection might be impossible as long as consciousness mediates our experiences. Each mind, he argues, creates its own version of reality, its own interpretation of others, making true understanding between conscious beings an unreachable goal. These theories raise profound questions about the nature of truth and understanding. If consciousness distorts everything it touches, how can we trust any of our conclusions, even about consciousness itself? Are we trapped in a hall of mirrors, forever unable to see beyond our own awareness? And if consciousness is indeed a barrier rather than a window to reality, what would it mean to truly wake up? As we continue our exploration of controversial philosophy, we must confront these unsettling possibilities. Perhaps the greatest deception of consciousness is not just its distortion of reality, but its ability to convince us that what we experience is real, true, and unchangeable. The question then becomes not just whether we can trust our consciousness, but whether we can ever escape its all-encompassing illusion. If consciousness distorts our perception of reality, and reality itself might be an illusion, we must confront an even more disturbing possibility. What if time, our most fundamental experience of existence, is itself a fabrication of consciousness? Dr. Maya Patel, leading researcher at the Temporal Consciousness Institute, proposes that linear time is not a natural feature of the universe, but a construction of conscious minds attempting to make sense of existence. Consider a moment when you're fully absorbed in an activity, lost in thought, or deep in meditation. Time seems to bend, stretch, or vanish entirely. Dr. Patel argues that these experiences aren't anomalies, but glimpses of a deeper truth. Time as we know it doesn't exist outside of conscious awareness. Her controversial temporal consciousness theory suggests that what we experience as past, present, and future are the artificial categories imposed by consciousness to create a manageable narrative of existence. The implications of this theory become more profound when combined with the work of Dr. Lars Andersson at the Stockholm Center for Quantum Consciousness. His research indicates that conscious beings might actually exist in all moments simultaneously, but our consciousness creates the illusion of sequential experience to protect us from the overwhelming reality of eternal presence. What we perceive as the flow of time might be nothing more than consciousness desperately trying to organize an infinite simultaneous existence into comprehensible fragments. Preparing and narrating this theory took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the theory. This perspective gained unexpected support from Dr. Amara Okafor's groundbreaking studies at the West African Institute for Consciousness Research. Her team discovered that people experiencing certain altered states of consciousness often report experiencing all moments of their lives simultaneously, past, present, and future, existing as a single, unified experience. These accounts consistently describe the linear experience of time as a kind of protective illusion, a way for consciousness to parcel out existence in manageable portions. Professor Zhang Wei of the Beijing Academy of Mind Studies takes this concept even further. In his controversial work, The Temporal Deception, he argues that death itself might be nothing more than a construct of consciousness, a way for our minds to make sense of eternal existence by imposing artificial beginnings and endings. If time is an illusion, he reasons, then so too must be our understanding of mortality. The theory becomes even more complex when we consider its implications for free will and moral responsibility. Dr. Rebecca Cohen, a pioneering researcher in neuroethics at the Montreal Institute for Consciousness Studies, argues that if linear time is an illusion, then cause and effect, as we understand them, must also be constructs of consciousness. Every decision we think we make, every action we believe we choose, might be part of an eternally existing pattern that our consciousness artificially separates into discrete moments and choices. This raises profound questions about the nature of moral responsibility. If all moments exist simultaneously, and our experience of making choices is an illusion created by consciousness, can anyone truly be responsible for their actions? Dr. Cohen's work suggests that our entire system of ethics might be based on a fundamental misunderstanding of the nature of existence and agency. The temporal consciousness theory also challenges our understanding of memory and identity. Dr. Nikolai Volkov, researching at the St. Petersburg Institute for Memory Studies, proposes that what we call memories might actually be consciousness creating artificial connections between simultaneously existing moments. Our sense of having a continuous identity through time might be nothing more than consciousness, weaving these eternal moments into a coherent narrative. Perhaps most unsettling is the work of Dr. Isabella Martinez at the Quantum Time Laboratory in Chile. Her research suggests that consciousness might not just distort our perception of time, it might actually create time as a way to avoid confronting the terrifying reality of timeless existence. The linear flow of time, she argues, is consciousness's most sophisticated and necessary illusion, without which we would be unable to function or maintain any sense of self. This perspective forces us to question everything we assume about causality, choice, and consequence. If time is an illusion created by consciousness, then every moment of suffering, joy, success, or failure exists eternally, neither beginning nor ending, but simply being. Our perception of progress, growth, and change might be nothing more than consciousness creating artificial distinctions within an unchanging, eternal now. As we continue to explore these controversial ideas, we must consider whether our entire understanding of existence is fundamentally shaped by consciousness's need to create comprehensible narratives out of an incomprehensible reality. Perhaps time itself is the ultimate illusion, not just distorting our perception of reality, but creating the very framework through which we experience existence. If consciousness creates our experience of time and reality, we must confront an even more radical possibility. What if individual identity itself is the greatest illusion of all? The concept of a distinct, continuous self, the I that we believe persists through time, might be nothing more than consciousness's most sophisticated deception. This is the foundation of identity dissolution theory, pioneered by Dr. Sophia Dimitriou at the Athens Institute for Consciousness Studies. Dr. Dimitrio's research suggests that what we experience as a unified self is actually a complex illusion maintained by consciousness moment by moment. Think about your own sense of self. You believe you're the same person who went to sleep last night and who will wake up tomorrow morning. But what evidence do you actually have for this continuity? Memory. We've already seen how unreliable that might be. Physical continuity. Your body's cells are constantly being replaced. Personality. That changes dramatically over time and in different contexts. The breakthrough work of Dr. James Morrison at the Sydney Center for Identity Research provides compelling evidence for this theory. His team has documented what they call identity fragments, moments when the illusion of a unified self temporarily breaks down. These fragments reveal that what we think of as a single coherent identity might actually be a collection of distinct states that consciousness artificially connects into a narrative of continuous selfhood. This perspective gained unexpected support from Dr. Aisha Rahman's studies at the Karachi Institute for Cognitive Science. Her research into meditation and altered states reveals that when consciousness is deliberately quieted, the sense of a unified self often dissolves, suggesting that individual identity requires constant maintenance by consciousness. Without this active maintenance, the illusion of a continuous self begins to unravel. Professor Xavier Dupont of the Paris Academy for Consciousness Studies takes this concept even further. In his controversial work, The Self-Deception, he argues that individual identity is not just an illusion, but a necessary fiction. A story consciousness tells itself to make existence manageable. According to Dupont, the truth of our existence might be too fluid, too interconnected, too vast for consciousness to handle without creating artificial boundaries of selfhood. The implications become even more profound when we consider Dr. Carmen Rodriguez's research at the Barcelona Laboratory for Identity Studies. Her work suggests that what we experience as individual consciousness might actually be fragments of a larger, unified field of awareness that our minds artificially divide into separate identities. The boundaries between self and other, she argues, are arbitrary constructions, lines drawn in consciousness to create the illusion of separate existence. This theory finds surprising resonance in the work of Dr. Hiroshi Tanaka at the Kyoto Center for Consciousness Research. His studies of social interaction reveal that individual identity is remarkably fluid, shifting, and adapting based on social context. What we think of as our true self might be nothing more than a collection of adaptive responses with no core identity beneath the shifting surface. Perhaps most unsettling is the research of Dr. Fatima Al-Sayed at the Dubai Institute for Advanced Consciousness Studies. Her work suggests that our emotional attachments to our sense of self might be consciousness's way of ensuring the maintenance of the identity illusion. The fear of death, the desire for recognition, the need for consistency, all might be mechanisms designed to reinforce the fiction of individual existence. The identity dissolution theory raises profound questions about responsibility and agency. If there is no continuous self, who makes decisions? Who bears responsibility for actions? Dr. Thomas Weber at the Vienna Ethics Institute argues that our entire system of moral and legal accountability might be based on a fundamental misunderstanding of the nature of identity and continuity. This perspective forces us to reconsider everything we assume about personal growth, achievement, and relationships. If individual identity is an illusion, what does it mean to improve oneself? What does it mean to love another person? Dr. Marina Popov at the Moscow Institute for Relationship Studies suggests that true connection might only be possible when we begin to see through the illusion of separate selves. The implications extend even to our understanding of consciousness itself. If individual identity is a construction, then what we think of as personal consciousness might be nothing more than temporary patterns in a vast field of awareness. Dr. Li Wei at the Shanghai Consciousness Laboratory proposes that what we call individual consciousness might be more like whirlpools in a river, distinct patterns that appear to have individual existence but are actually inseparable from the larger flow. As we delve deeper into these controversial ideas, we must consider whether our entire understanding of individuality and personal identity is fundamentally shaped by consciousness's need to create manageable units of experience out of an undivided reality. Perhaps the self is the most sophisticated and necessary illusion, not just distorting our perception of who we are, but creating the very possibility of experiencing existence as an individual being. If individual identity is an illusion, we must confront an even more disturbing possibility. What if free will itself is not just an illusion, but a trap, a mechanism designed to ensure our continued participation in a system we never chose to join? This is the foundation of volitional entrapment theory, developed by Dr. Nathan Pierce at the Virtual Freedom Institute in Seattle. Dr. Pierce's controversial research suggests that our sense of having free will, the feeling that we make genuine choices, might be the most sophisticated form of control ever devised. Consider how the belief in free will shapes your existence. You feel responsible for your decisions, accountable for your actions, invested in your choices. But what if this very sense of agency is what keeps you bound to patterns of behavior you never truly chose? The groundbreaking work of Dr. Lucia Ortiz at the Buenos Aires Center for Decision Science provides startling evidence for this theory. Her team has identified what they call choice architecture, subtle patterns in human decision-making that suggest our apparently free choices follow predetermined paths we're not even aware of. What feels like freedom might actually be an elaborate maze, with consciousness creating the illusion of choice while following deeply embedded programs. This perspective gained unexpected validation from Dr. Kwame Mensah's research at the Ghana Institute for Cognitive Liberty. His studies of decision-making patterns across cultures reveal that what people consider free choices are remarkably predictable when viewed from the outside. Even our most personal decisions, career choices, romantic partners, life goals, often follow recognizable patterns that suggest an underlying script rather than genuine freedom. Professor Alexandra Kovac of the Zagreb Consciousness Laboratory takes this concept further in her work, The Freedom Paradox. She argues that the more strongly we believe in our free will, the more effectively we fulfill predetermined patterns of behavior. The sense of being a free agent, she suggests, might be exactly what prevents us from recognizing the forces that actually shape our actions. The implications become even more unsettling when we consider Dr. Benjamin Goldman's findings at the Tel Aviv Institute for Choice Studies. His research indicates that moments of apparent rebellion or resistance when we feel we're breaking free from external control, might be built into the system itself. Even our attempts to escape predetermined patterns might be part of those very patterns. This theory finds surprising support in the work of Dr. Yuki Yamamoto at the Osaka Freedom Research Center. Her studies of decision-making under various conditions suggest that consciousness might create the sensation of choice, specifically to prevent us from experiencing the terror of recognizing our lack of genuine agency. The feeling of making free choices, she argues, is consciousness's way of making determinism palatable. Perhaps most disturbing is the research of Dr. Isabella Cruz at the Madrid Institute for Volition Studies. Her work suggests that what we experience as internal motivation, our desires, ambitions, and goals, might be external programs that consciousness presents as our own choices to ensure our willing participation. The things we think we want most might be precisely what keeps us trapped in predetermined patterns. The volitional entrapment theory raises profound questions about responsibility and moral agency. If our sense of free will is itself a form of control, how do we understand concepts like praise and blame? Dr. Heinrich Weber at the Berlin Ethics Center argues that our entire moral framework might be part of the control system, using guilt and pride to reinforce the illusion of free agency. This perspective forces us to reconsider everything we assume about personal development and achievement. If our sense of making free choices is actually what entraps us, what does it mean to grow or change? Dr. Anastasia Petrova at the Moscow Institute for Human Development suggests that true freedom might only be possible when we begin to see through the illusion of free will itself. The implications extend even to our understanding of resistance and revolution. If the system includes our attempts to resist it, how can genuine change ever occur? Dr. Jacques Leblanc at the Paris Center for Social Change proposes that real transformation might require something more radical than choice. It might require stepping outside the entire framework of voluntary action. As we explore these controversial ideas, we must consider whether our cherished sense of free will might be the most sophisticated form of control ever devised. Perhaps the feeling of making free choices is the ultimate trap, not just disguising our lack of genuine agency, but ensuring our willing participation in patterns we never truly chose. The question then becomes not how to make better choices, but whether choice itself is the mechanism of our entrapment. If our sense of free will is a trap, we must confront an even more radical possibility. What if human progress itself is an elaborate deception? This is the foundation of progressive paradox theory, developed by Dr. Olivia Blackwood at the Institute for Future Studies in Oxford. She suggests that what we call progress, technological advancement, social evolution, intellectual development, might actually be a sophisticated form of regression, moving us further from rather than closer to truth and freedom. Consider how we measure progress. Technological capability, scientific understanding, social complexity. But what if these metrics themselves are part of the deception? Dr. Blackwood's research suggests that each step forward in conventional progress might actually be a step away from a more fundamental form of understanding that we've lost the ability to recognize. The groundbreaking work of Dr. Abdul Rahman at the Singapore Center for Technological Philosophy provides compelling evidence for this theory. His studies show that as societies become more advanced by conventional measures, their members become increasingly unable to perceive certain aspects of reality that were apparent to their primitive ancestors. What we call progress might actually be a process of systematic forgetting. This perspective gained unexpected support from Dr. Maria Santos's research at the Brazilian Institute for Cognitive Evolution. Her team has documented what they call progress-induced blindness, the way technological advancement seems to diminish certain forms of human awareness and capability. The more tools we create to understand the world, she argues, the less able we become to understand it directly. Professor Henrik Nielsen of the Copenhagen Future Studies Academy takes this concept further in his controversial work, The Progress Trap. He argues that each technological solution we develop creates new problems that require more complex solutions, trapping us in an escalating cycle of dependency on our own creations. What appears to be forward movement might actually be a spiral into deeper entanglement. The implications become more disturbing when we consider Dr. Amara Okonjo's findings at the Lagos Institute for Social Evolution. Her research indicates that what we call social progress, the development of more complex social structures and institutions, might actually be a process of increasing alienation from our natural state of being. Each new layer of social sophistication, she suggests, adds another barrier between us and authentic existence. This theory finds surprising validation in the work of Dr. Chen Wei at the Shanghai Center for Historical Consciousness. His studies of ancient philosophical texts suggest that many early human societies possessed forms of understanding that we've not only lost, but become incapable of recognizing as knowledge. What we dismiss as primitive might actually represent more sophisticated ways of engaging with reality. Perhaps most unsettling is the research of Dr. Isabel Mendoza at the Mexico City Institute for Progress Studies. Her work suggests that our very ability to recognize progress might be inversely related to genuine advancement. The more convinced we become of our forward movement, she argues, the more deeply we might be trapped in regressive patterns we can no longer perceive. The progressive paradox theory raises profound questions about the direction of human development. If what we call progress is actually regression, how do we understand the purpose of human civilization? Dr. Viktor Petrov at the Moscow Institute for Human Development suggests that our entire conception of advancement might need to be reversed, that true progress might require a fundamental unlearning of what we consider progress. This perspective forces us to reconsider everything we assume about human achievement and potential. If our technological and social advancement is actually moving us away from truth, what does it mean to evolve or improve? Dr. Sarah Mackenzie at the Edinburgh Center for Future Studies proposes that authentic advancement might require abandoning our conventional understanding of progress entirely. The implications extend even to our understanding of human consciousness itself. If progress is a form of regression, might consciousness as we know it be an evolutionary dead end rather than an advancement? Dr. Jean-Paul Dubois at the Paris Institute for Consciousness Studies suggests that what we consider higher consciousness might actually be a more limited form of awareness than what preceded it. As we delve deeper into these controversial ideas, we must consider whether our entire conception of human progress is fundamentally flawed. Perhaps what we call advancement is actually a sophisticated form of retreat, not just from our natural state, but from a more authentic way of being that we can no longer even imagine. The question then becomes not how to progress further, but whether we can find our way back to what we've lost in our relentless push forward. If human progress is a form of regression, we must confront an even more unsettling possibility. What if knowledge itself is a form of ignorance? This is the foundation of epistemic darkness theory, developed by Dr. Marcus Reed at the Institute for Knowledge Studies in Cambridge. He proposes that the very act of knowing something might prevent us from understanding deeper truths. That knowledge, rather than illuminating reality, might actually obscure it. Consider how acquiring knowledge shapes your perception. Once you learn something, it becomes difficult, if not impossible, to see the world without that framework. Dr. Reed's research suggests that each piece of knowledge we acquire might actually be closing off alternative ways of understanding reality. The more we know, the more rigid and limited our perspective becomes. The groundbreaking work of Dr. Lakshmi Patel at the Mumbai Center for Cognitive Sciences provides striking evidence for this theory. Her studies show that experts in various fields often become unable to perceive aspects of reality that contradict their established knowledge. What we call expertise might actually be a sophisticated form of selective blindness, preventing us from seeing anything that doesn't fit within our learned frameworks. This perspective gained unexpected validation from Dr. Felix Bernhard's research at the Vienna Institute for Epistemological Studies. His team has documented what they call knowledge-induced blindness, the way academic education seems to diminish certain forms of intuitive understanding. The more formally educated someone becomes, he argues, the less able they are to grasp certain fundamental aspects of reality that remain apparent to those with less formal knowledge. Professor Diana Chang of the Berkeley Consciousness Laboratory takes this concept further in her controversial work, The Knowledge Paradox. She argues that the scientific method itself, while powerful for understanding certain aspects of reality, might actually be preventing us from accessing other, equally valid forms of understanding. Our commitment to empirical knowledge, she suggests, might be closing off entire dimensions of reality that require different modes of comprehension. The implications become more profound when we consider Dr. Alejandro Ruiz's findings at the Epistemological Research Center in Mexico City. His work indicates that what we consider ignorance might actually be a more open and receptive state than knowledge. Those who know less might actually be more capable of perceiving certain aspects of reality that become invisible to the well-informed. This theory finds surprising support in the work of Dr. Aisha Hassan at the Cairo Institute for Wisdom Studies. Her research into ancient mystical traditions suggests that many historical practices of unknowing or emptying the mind might actually be sophisticated techniques for accessing deeper forms of understanding that our modern knowledge-based approach makes impossible. Perhaps most disturbing is the research of Dr. Nicolas Laurent at the Montreal Center for Cognitive Studies. His work suggests that the very structure of human language and logical thinking, the foundations of what we consider knowledge, might be fundamentally limiting our ability to perceive reality as it truly is. Each concept we learn, each idea we master, might actually be another barrier between us and direct understanding. The epistemic darkness. Theory raises profound questions about education and learning. If knowledge itself is a form of ignorance, how should we approach the development of understanding? Dr. Yuki Tanaka at the Tokyo Institute for Educational Philosophy suggests that true education might require unlearning as much as learning, a systematic dismantling of accumulated knowledge rather than its continuous acquisition. This perspective forces us to reconsider everything we assume about intelligence and wisdom. If knowledge creates blindness, what does it mean to be truly intelligent? Dr. Elizabeth Murray at the Dublin Centre for Wisdom Studies proposes that genuine wisdom might lie not in what we know, but in our capacity to remain open to what we don't know, and perhaps can never know through conventional means. The implications extend even to our understanding of consciousness itself. If knowledge limits perception, might consciousness as we know it, built on accumulated knowledge and experience, be fundamentally incapable of perceiving ultimate reality? Dr. Mikhail Volkov at the St. Petersburg Institute for Consciousness Research suggests that what we consider normal consciousness might actually be a state of sophisticated ignorance, maintained by our commitment to knowledge-based understanding. As we explore these controversial ideas, we must consider whether our pursuit of knowledge might be leading us further from rather than closer to truth. Perhaps what we call learning is actually a process of systematic self-limitation, not just from direct experience, but from forms of understanding that lie beyond the reach of conventional knowledge. The question then becomes not how to know more, but whether we can find ways to know less or know differently in service of deeper understanding. If knowledge itself can be a form of ignorance, we must confront an even more radical possibility. What if language, our primary tool for understanding and communicating, is actually the greatest barrier to truth? This is the foundation of linguistic imprisonment theory, developed by Dr. Rachel Foster at the Institute for Communication Studies in Montreal. She suggests that language, rather than enabling understanding, might actually be trapping us in a prison of artificial concepts that prevent us from experiencing reality directly. Consider how language shapes your perception. Once you learn to name something, you stop seeing it as it truly is and start seeing it through the lens of its linguistic label. Dr. Foster's research suggests that every word we learn might actually be a brick in the wall between us and direct experience. The more sophisticated our vocabulary becomes, the more removed we might be from unmediated reality. The groundbreaking work of Dr. Takashi Yamamoto at the Kyoto Language Research Center provides compelling evidence for this theory. His studies show that different language systems create fundamentally different perceptions of reality, suggesting that no linguistic framework can capture truth. Each one simply constructs its own version of reality. What we consider understanding might actually be a form of structured delusion maintained by our linguistic systems. This perspective gained unexpected support from Dr. Ana Silva's research at the Brazilian Institute for Cognitive Linguistics. Her team has documented what they call linguistic blindness, the way language acquisition appears to diminish certain forms of pre-linguistic awareness in children. The more words we learn, she argues, the less able we become to perceive aspects of reality that exist beyond linguistic categorization. Professor Ibrahim al-Rashid of the Dubai Center for Consciousness Studies takes this concept further in his controversial work, The Language Trap. He argues that the very structure of human languages, with their subjects, objects, and actions, imposes a fundamentally distorted view of reality. Our grammar, he suggests, might be a cage that prevents us from perceiving the true nature of existence, which might not conform to these artificial categories at all. The implications become more disturbing when we consider Dr. Eva Schmidt's findings at the Copenhagen Institute for Nonverbal Cognition. Her research indicates that moments of profound understanding often occur precisely when language falls away. The deepest insights, she suggests, might only be accessible in the spaces between words, in experiences that resist linguistic categorization. This theory finds surprising validation in the work of Dr. Miguel Santos at the Lima Center for Altered States Research. His studies of meditation and mystical experiences suggest that what we consider peak experiences of reality often coincide with the temporary suspension of linguistic thinking. True understanding, he argues, might require escaping the confines of language altogether. Perhaps most unsettling is the research of Dr. Claire Bennett at the Sydney Institute for Communication Studies. Her work suggests that our reliance on language might be actively preventing the evolution of alternative forms of communication and understanding. By becoming so deeply embedded in linguistic thinking, we might have closed ourselves off from more direct forms of knowing that other species, or even our pre-linguistic ancestors, might have possessed. The linguistic imprisonment theory raises profound questions about education, culture, and human development. If language itself is a barrier to truth, how should we approach learning and communication? Dr. Nikolai Petrov at the Moscow Academy of Cognitive Science suggests that true education might require developing capacities for non-linguistic understanding, ways of knowing that transcend the limitations of words. This perspective forces us to reconsider everything we assume about human intelligence and consciousness. If language limits rather than expands our understanding, what does it mean to be intelligent? Dr. Amara Okoro at the Lagos Institute for Consciousness Studies proposes that genuine intelligence might lie not in our capacity for linguistic thought, but in our ability to perceive and understand reality beyond the constraints of language. The implications extend even to our understanding of social relationships and culture. If language imprisons rather than connects us, might our entire social structure be based on shared delusions maintained by linguistic frameworks? Dr. Hans Weber at the Berlin Center for Social Philosophy suggests that what we call culture might actually be a sophisticated system of collective imprisonment in artificial linguistic constructs. As we delve deeper into these controversial ideas, we must consider whether our reliance on language might be the ultimate barrier to understanding. Perhaps what we call communication is actually a process of mutual confusion, not just a sharing of limited perspectives, but an active participation in a system that prevents us from accessing deeper truths. The question then becomes not how to use language more effectively, but whether we can find ways to understand and connect beyond its confines. If language imprisons our understanding, we must confront an even more disturbing possibility. What if memory itself is not a record of the past, but a system of continuous deception? This is the foundation of memory fabrication theory, developed by Dr. Alexandra Winters at the Institute for Temporal Cognition in Stockholm. She proposes that what we experience as memories might actually be ongoing constructions designed to maintain our current narrative of reality rather than accurate records of past events. Consider how your memories seem to change over time. Experiences that once seemed traumatic become valuable lessons, while moments you thought were perfect become tinged with melancholy. Dr. Winter's research suggests that these aren't just changes in perspective. They might be evidence that memory itself is actively fabricating our past to serve our present needs, creating an illusion of continuity that masks the true nature of temporal existence. The groundbreaking work of Dr. Rashid Khan at the Islamabad Center for Memory Research provides striking evidence for this theory. His studies show that when people recall the same event multiple times, they're not accessing a stored record, but creating new versions of the experience each time. What we think of as remembering might actually be a sophisticated form of real-time storytelling, with our minds constructing whatever past best serves our current narrative. This perspective gained unexpected support from Dr. Lucia Mendoza's research at the Chilean Institute for Cognitive Studies. Her team has documented what they call memory convergence, the way groups of people unconsciously align their memories to create coherent, shared narratives. These findings suggest that even our most personal memories might be collective constructions, shaped by social needs rather than historical truth. Professor David Chen of the Hong Kong Neuroscience Center takes this concept further in his controversial work, The Memory Mirage. He argues that the very structure of human memory might be designed not to preserve truth, but to maintain psychological stability. Our inability to accurately recall the past, he suggests, might not be a flaw, but a feature, protecting us from a reality too fluid and chaotic for our minds to handle. The implications become more profound when we consider Dr. Isabella Romano's findings at the Venice Institute for Consciousness Studies. Her research indicates that what we experience as memory might actually be a form of continuous present moment fabrication. The past, she argues, might not exist at all except as an ongoing construction created moment by moment to give our current experience context and meaning. This theory finds surprising validation in the work of Dr. Samuel Okafor at the Lagos Memory Research Facility. His studies of amnesia patients suggest that even without access to their personal histories, people automatically generate complex autobiographical narratives. This indicates that the creation of memories might be more fundamental to consciousness than the actual retention of past experiences. Perhaps most unsettling is the research of Dr. Emma Thompson at the Edinburgh Center for Temporal Studies. Her work suggests that our entire sense of personal history might be a sophisticated illusion, with consciousness continuously generating and regenerating memories to maintain the fiction of a consistent self moving through time. What we consider our life story might be more akin to an ongoing improvisation than a historical record. The memory fabrication theory raises profound questions about identity and authenticity. If our memories are continuous constructions rather than reliable records, how can we know who we really are. Dr. Pierre Dubois at the Paris Institute for Identity Studies suggests that authentic selfhood might need to be understood as something emerging in the present moment, rather than as a product of accumulated experience. This perspective forces us to reconsider everything we assume about learning and growth. If memory is fabrication rather than preservation, what does it mean to learn from experience? Dr. Yuki Sato at the Tokyo Institute for Learning Sciences proposes that true learning might have more to do with our capacity for creative reinterpretation than with accurate recall of past events. The implications extend even to our understanding of truth and reality itself. If our memories are ongoing constructions rather than reliable records, how can we trust any of our conclusions about the nature of existence? Dr. Maria Costa at the Lisbon Center for Epistemological Studies suggests that what we call truth might need to be radically reconceived as something emerging in the present, rather than as something discovered and preserved from the past. As we explore these controversial ideas, we must consider whether our entire understanding of memory might be fundamentally flawed. Perhaps what we call remembering is actually a sophisticated form of present moment creation, not just a retrieval of stored information, but an active process of constructing whatever past best serves our current experience of reality. The question then becomes not how to improve our memory, but whether we can find ways to engage with this continuous process of creation more consciously and purposefully. If memory is an ongoing fabrication, we must confront an even more unsettling possibility. What if emotion itself is not a genuine response to reality, but a sophisticated control mechanism? This is the foundation of emotional control theory, developed by Dr. Victoria Reynolds at the Institute for Affective Studies in Vancouver. She proposes that our emotional experiences, rather than being authentic reactions to life events, might be pre-programmed responses designed to maintain specific patterns of behavior and perception. Consider how emotions shape your actions. Fear makes you retreat. Love makes you attach. Anger makes you fight. Dr. Reynolds' research suggests that these responses might not be natural reactions, but carefully calibrated control mechanisms that guide our behavior in predetermined ways. What we experience as authentic feeling might actually be a form of sophisticated programming. The groundbreaking work of Dr. Arjun Patel at the Mumbai Center for Emotional Research provides compelling evidence for this theory. His studies show that emotional responses follow remarkably predictable patterns across cultures and contexts, suggesting they might be more like pre-installed software than genuine reactions to unique situations. What we consider spontaneous emotional responses might actually be running on ancient behavioral scripts. This perspective gained unexpected support from Dr. Sofia Martinez's research at the Barcelona Institute for Neuroemotional Studies. Her team has documented what they call emotional loops, recurring patterns of emotional response that seem designed to maintain specific behavioral states rather than reflect authentic reactions to circumstances. These findings suggest our emotional lives might be more like controlled simulations than genuine experiences. Professor James Morrison of the Melbourne Consciousness Laboratory takes this concept further in his controversial work, The Emotion Machine. He argues that what we experience as feelings might actually be sophisticated feedback mechanisms designed to maintain social order and behavioral consistency. Our most intense emotions, he suggests, might be the ones most carefully engineered to control our actions. The implications become more disturbing when we consider Dr. Fatima al-Rashid's findings at the Dubai Center for Behavioral Studies. Her research indicates that what we consider our most personal and authentic emotional responses often align perfectly with social control mechanisms. Even our rebellions and resistance, she argues, might be programmed emotional responses designed to channel dissent in predictable ways. This theory finds surprising validation in the work of Dr. Klaus Weber at the Berlin Institute for Effective Science. His studies of emotional development suggest that rather than learning to regulate our emotions as we mature, we might actually be learning to generate them according to social protocols. What we call emotional growth might actually be the progressive installation of control mechanisms. Perhaps most unsettling is the research of Dr. Yuki Tanaka at the Kyoto Emotion Research Center. Her work suggests that our capacity for emotional experience might itself be a sophisticated limitation, a way of channeling our responses to reality through predetermined pathways rather than allowing for truly spontaneous reactions. What we consider emotional depth might actually be the extent of our programming. The emotional control theory raises profound questions about authenticity and human connection. If our emotions are programmed responses rather than genuine reactions, what does it mean to have authentic relationships? Dr. Isabella Santos at the Rio Institute for Human Relations suggests that true connection might require transcending our programmed emotional responses rather than expressing them. This perspective forces us to reconsider everything we assume about psychological health and emotional intelligence. If emotions are control mechanisms rather than authentic experiences, what does it mean to be emotionally well-adjusted? Dr. Mikhail Volkov at the Moscow Center for Psychological Studies proposes that true psychological freedom might require recognizing and potentially bypassing our emotional programming rather than embracing it. The implications extend even to our understanding of consciousness and free will. If our emotions are pre-programmed responses rather than genuine reactions, how much of our conscious experience is actually our own? Dr. Sarah Anderson at the Edinburgh Consciousness Institute suggests that what we call emotional life might be more like a sophisticated virtual reality system designed to guide our behavior while creating the illusion of authentic response. As we delve deeper into these controversial ideas, we must consider whether our entire emotional landscape might be a form of invisible control. Perhaps what we call feelings are actually sophisticated behavioral guidance systems, not expressions of genuine response to reality, but carefully designed mechanisms ensuring our actions follow predetermined patterns. The question then becomes not how to better express or understand our emotions, but whether we can find ways to experience reality beyond these programmed responses. If emotions are control mechanisms, we must confront an even more radical possibility. What if morality itself is not a path to goodness, but a sophisticated system of enslavement? This is the foundation of moral imprisonment theory, developed by Dr. Nathan Blake at the Institute for Ethical Studies in Oxford. He suggests that what we consider moral behavior might actually be a complex web of restrictions designed to limit human potential rather than enhance it. Consider how moral principles shape your choices, the sense of right and wrong, good and evil, virtue and vice. Dr. Blake's research suggests that these moral frameworks might not guide us toward authentic goodness, but instead trap us in predetermined patterns of behavior that prevent us from exploring the full range of human possibility. The groundbreaking work of Dr. Leila Hassan at the Cairo Center for Moral Psychology provides striking evidence for this theory. Her studies show that moral convictions, rather than leading to genuine ethical behavior, often serve to justify and perpetuate existing power structures. What we consider moral development might actually be the progressive installation of behavioral limits disguised as virtues. This perspective gained unexpected support from Dr. Marcus Chen's research at the Singapore Institute for Behavioral Ethics. His team has documented what they call moral paralysis, the way ethical frameworks often prevent people from taking necessary or innovative actions that fall outside conventional moral boundaries. These findings suggest our moral systems might be more about control than genuine ethical development. Professor Amara Okonjo of the Lagos Philosophy Center takes this concept further in her controversial work, The Morality Trap. She argues that moral systems, while claiming to elevate human behavior, actually serve to suppress our most dynamic and transformative potentials. Our highest virtues, she suggests, might be the very chains that keep us bound to limited modes of existence. The implications become more disturbing when we consider Dr. Julia Kovac's findings at the Zagreb Institute for Ethical Studies. Her research indicates that what we experience as moral intuition might actually be internalized social control mechanisms designed to maintain order by making certain behaviors unthinkable rather than merely forbidden. This theory finds surprising validation in the work of Dr. Rafael Santos at the Buenos Aires Center for Moral Research. His studies of moral development suggest that rather than becoming more ethically sophisticated as we mature, we might actually be becoming more thoroughly imprisoned by moral constructs. What we call conscience might be the voice of our own containment. Perhaps most unsettling is the research of Dr. Isabella Morrison at the Melbourne Ethics Laboratory. Her work suggests that our capacity for moral reasoning might itself be a limitation, a way of ensuring that even our rebellions and transformations occur within preset boundaries. What we consider ethical progress might actually be the refinement of our own constraints. The moral imprisonment theory raises profound questions about human potential and societal development. If morality is a system of control rather than genuine ethical advancement, how should we approach questions of right and wrong? Dr. Henrik Nielsen at the Copenhagen Institute for Social Philosophy suggests that true ethical behavior might require transcending conventional morality rather than perfecting it. This perspective forces us to reconsider everything we assume about human improvement and social progress. If moral systems are mechanisms of control rather than paths to goodness, what does it mean to become a better person? Dr. Marie Dubois at the Paris Center for Human Development proposes that authentic human growth might require breaking free from moral frameworks rather than adhering to them more strictly. The implications extend even to our understanding of consciousness and free will. If our moral intuitions are pre-programmed limitations, rather than genuine ethical insights, how can we trust any of our decisions about right and wrong? Dr. Yuki Yamamoto at the Kyoto Ethics Institute suggests that what we call moral wisdom might actually be the most sophisticated form of behavioral conditioning. As we explore these controversial ideas, we must consider whether our entire conception of morality might be fundamentally flawed. Perhaps what we call ethical behavior is actually a complex system of restrictions, not guiding us toward genuine goodness, but keeping us confined within acceptable boundaries of action and thought. The question then becomes not how to be more moral, but whether we can find ways to act ethically beyond the constraints of conventional morality itself. If morality is a system of imprisonment, we must confront an even more disturbing possibility. What if meaning itself is the ultimate trap? This is the foundation of meaning entrapment theory, developed by Dr. Sophia Reed at the Institute for Existential Studies in Amsterdam. She proposes that our desperate search for meaning and purpose might be the most sophisticated mechanism, keeping us bound to limited modes of existence. Consider how the quest for meaning shapes your life. The need to find purpose, to make sense of experiences, to believe that everything happens for a reason. Dr. Reed's research suggests that this compulsive meaning-making might not be a path to understanding, but a way of preventing us from encountering reality in its raw, meaningless state. The groundbreaking work of Dr. Carlos Mendez at the Barcelona Center for Consciousness Studies provides compelling evidence for this theory. His studies show that when people find meaning in events, they become less able to perceive alternative possibilities or engage with reality directly. What we consider meaningful insights might actually be self-imposed limitations on perception. This perspective gained unexpected support from Dr. Aisha Khan's research at the Lahore Institute for Cognitive Science. Her team has documented what they call meaning blindness, the way finding significance in events often prevents people from seeing their true complexity and randomness. These findings suggest our meaning-making abilities might actually be sophisticated perceptual filters. Professor Thomas Weber of the Berlin Philosophy Center takes this concept further in his controversial work, The Meaning Maze. He argues that the human capacity to create meaning, while seemingly enlightening, might actually be a trap that keeps us endlessly searching for significance in an existence that fundamentally has none. Our most profound insights, he suggests, might be the bars of our conceptual prison. The implications become more unsettling when we consider Dr. Nina Petrov's findings at the Moscow Institute for Existential Psychology. Her research indicates that what we experience as meaningful connections or patterns might actually be arbitrary associations that our minds impose on reality to make it manageable. The more meaning we find, she argues, the further we might be from genuine understanding. This theory finds surprising validation in the work of Dr. James Chen at the Hong Kong Center for Mind Studies. His research into peak experiences suggests that moments of genuine insight often occur precisely when people temporarily lose their ability to generate meaning. True understanding, he proposes, might require escaping our compulsion to make everything meaningful. Perhaps most disturbing is the research of Dr. Isabella Santos at the Rio Institute for Consciousness Research. Her work suggests that our capacity for meaning-making might be an evolutionary trap, a development that, while helping our species survive, actually prevents us from evolving beyond our current limitations. What we consider our greatest gift might be our most fundamental constraint. The meaning entrapment theory raises profound questions about human development and potential. If meaning-making is a trap rather than a path to understanding, how should we approach our existence? Dr. Marie Laurent at the Paris Center for Human Evolution suggests that true growth might require learning to exist without the constant need to make everything meaningful. This perspective forces us to reconsider everything we assume about wisdom and enlightenment. If finding meaning is a form of self-imprisonment rather than liberation, what does it mean to be wise? Dr. Hiroshi Tanaka at the Kyoto Wisdom Research Center proposes that genuine wisdom might lie in our capacity to resist the urge to make meaning rather than in our ability to find it. The implications extend even to our understanding of consciousness itself. If meaning is a trap, might consciousness, with its constant meaning-making activity, be the ultimate prison? Dr. Sarah Davidson at the Edinburgh Consciousness Laboratory suggests that what we call higher consciousness might actually be a more sophisticated form of self-imposed limitation. As we delve deeper into these controversial ideas, we must consider whether our entire approach to understanding existence might be fundamentally flawed. Perhaps what we call meaning-making is actually a complex system of self-imposed barriers, not revealing truth, but preventing us from encountering reality in its raw, meaningless state. The question then becomes not how to find more meaning, but whether we can find ways to exist authentically in a universe that might fundamentally lack any inherent significance. If meaning itself is a trap, we must confront an even more radical possibility. What if belief in truth itself is the most sophisticated form of self-deception? This is the foundation of truth negation theory, developed by Dr. Marcus Sterling at the Institute for Epistemological Studies in Cambridge. He proposes that our fundamental assumption that truth exists and can be discovered might be the very thing preventing us from encountering reality as it actually is. Consider how the concept of truth shapes your perception. The assumption that there are definitive answers, that reality has a fixed nature that can be understood, that some things are definitively real while others are false. Dr. Sterling's research suggests that this binary approach to reality might be a fundamental distortion, a way of imposing artificial structure on something that defies all such categorization. The groundbreaking work of Dr. Amira Hassan at the Cairo Center for Reality Studies provides striking evidence for this theory. Her studies show that when people become convinced they found truth, their ability to perceive alternative possibilities dramatically decreases. What we consider discovering truth might actually be a process of closing ourselves off from wider realms of possibility. This perspective gained unexpected support from Dr. Lucas Silva's research at the São Paulo Institute for Cognitive Science. His team has documented what they call truth blindness, the way believing in absolute truth seems to create perceptual barriers that prevent people from engaging with reality's fundamental fluidity. These findings suggest our very concept of truth might be a sophisticated form of selective blindness. Professor Elena Volkov of the Moscow Philosophy Center takes this concept further in her controversial work, The Truth Illusion. She argues that the human drive to discover truth, while seemingly noble, might actually be a defensive mechanism protecting us from the terrifying possibility that reality might not conform to any of our concepts of truth or falsity. The implications become more unsettling when we consider Dr. Jin Park's findings at the Seoul Institute for Consciousness Studies. His research indicates that what we experience as moments of discovering truth might actually be instances of successfully imposing our mental structures on reality rather than genuine insights into its nature. The more certain we become of truth, he argues, the more thoroughly we might be trapped in our own conceptual frameworks. This theory finds surprising validation in the work of Dr. Isabella Martinez at the Chilean Laboratory for Epistemological Research. Her studies of scientific discovery suggest that major breakthroughs often occur not when new truths are found, but when existing concepts of truth temporarily break down. Real insight, she proposes, might require abandoning our attachment to the very idea of truth. Perhaps most disturbing is the research of Dr. Thomas Weber at the Vienna Center for Knowledge Studies. His work suggests that our capacity for recognizing truth might actually be a limitation, a way of reducing the infinite complexity of reality into manageable but fundamentally distorted patterns. What we consider our ability to discern truth might be our most basic perceptual constraint. The truth negation theory raises profound questions about knowledge and understanding. If belief in truth itself is a form of self-deception, how should we approach learning and discovery? Dr. Sarah O'Connor at the Dublin Institute for Cognitive Research suggests that genuine understanding might require developing comfort with perpetual uncertainty rather than seeking definitive answers. This perspective forces us to reconsider everything we assume about wisdom and expertise. If truth is an illusion, what does it mean to be knowledgeable? Dr. Hiroshi Yamamoto at the Tokyo Center for Wisdom Studies proposes that real expertise might lie in our capacity to navigate uncertainty rather than in our ability to establish truth. The implications extend even to our understanding of consciousness and reality itself. If truth is a defensive fiction, might consciousness, with its constant truth-seeking activity, be fundamentally misguided? Dr. Rachel Cohen at the Jerusalem Consciousness Laboratory suggests that what we call objective reality might be nothing more than our most deeply embedded illusions about truth. As we explore these controversial ideas, we must consider whether our entire approach to understanding might be fundamentally flawed. Perhaps what we call truth-seeking is actually a sophisticated form of self-limitation, not revealing reality, but preventing us from encountering its true nature, which might be far stranger and more fluid than our concepts of truth allow. The question then becomes not how to find truth, but whether we can find ways to engage with reality beyond our deeply ingrained need for truth and certainty. If truth itself is self-deception, we must confront an even more unsettling possibility. What if love, our most cherished emotional experience, is actually the most sophisticated form of evolutionary manipulation? This is the foundation of love deception theory, developed by Dr. Claire Bennett at the Institute for Emotional Studies in Melbourne. She suggests that what we experience as love might be an elaborate biological mechanism designed to ensure species continuation, disguised as transcendent connection. Consider how love shapes your behavior, the overwhelming attraction the sense of completeness with another person, the willingness to sacrifice for them. Dr. Bennett's research suggests that these experiences, rather than being genuine connections, might be carefully calibrated biological responses designed to override rational decision-making and ensure reproductive success. The groundbreaking work of Dr. Miguel Hernandez at the Barcelona Center for Attachment Studies provides compelling evidence for this theory. His studies show that the neural patterns associated with romantic love are remarkably similar to those observed in addictive behaviors and obsessive-compulsive disorders. What we consider the height of emotional connection might actually be a form of programmed neurological compulsion. This perspective gained unexpected support from Dr. Aisha Patel's research at the Mumbai Institute for Relationship Studies. Her team has documented what they call love blindness, the way romantic attachment seems to systematically disable critical thinking and realistic assessment of situations. These findings suggest that love might be more about ensuring biological imperatives than fostering genuine connection. Professor Lars Andersson of the Stockholm Psychology Center takes this concept further in his controversial work, The Love Illusion. He argues that the human capacity for romantic love, while celebrated in culture and art, might actually be a sophisticated trap that keeps us bound to reproductive behaviors while creating the illusion of free choice and emotional depth. The implications become more disturbing when we consider Dr. Yuki Tanaka's findings at the Tokyo Relationship Research Institute. Her work indicates that what we experience as unique personal love might actually be highly predictable patterns of behavior triggered by specific biological and social cues. The more intense the love feels, she argues, the more thoroughly we might be running on predetermined scripts. This theory finds surprising validation in the work of Dr. Sarah Mackenzie at the Edinburgh Evolution Laboratory. Her studies of mate selection suggest that our most profound feelings of connection might be nothing more than sophisticated calculations performed by our genetic programming. What we consider matters of the heart might actually be complex algorithms ensuring optimal genetic combinations. Perhaps most unsettling is the research of Dr. Ibrahim al-Rashid at the Dubai Center for Consciousness Studies. His work suggests that our capacity for romantic love might be an evolutionary dead end, a mechanism that once served species survival, but now keeps us trapped in patterns of attachment that no longer serve our development. What we consider our highest emotional capacity might be an outdated survival tool. The love deception theory raises profound questions about human relationships and connection. If love is biological manipulation rather than genuine emotion, how should we approach intimate relationships? Dr. Maria Santos at the Lisbon Institute for Human Relations suggests that true connection might require transcending our programmed responses rather than surrendering to them. This perspective forces us to reconsider everything we assume about human bonding and emotional fulfillment. If love is deception, what does it mean to have meaningful relationships? Dr. Thomas Weber at the Vienna Center for Social Psychology proposes that authentic connection might lie in our capacity to recognize and potentially resist our biological programming, rather than embracing it. The implications extend even to our understanding of consciousness and free will. If love is manipulative programming, rather than authentic feeling, How much of our emotional life is actually our own? Dr. Rachel Cohen at the Montreal Consciousness Institute suggests that what we call romantic love might be the most sophisticated form of biological control, creating the illusion of choice while ensuring predetermined outcomes. As we delve deeper into these controversial ideas, we must consider whether our entire conception of love might be fundamentally flawed. Perhaps what we call the height of emotional experience is actually a complex system of biological manipulation, not revealing genuine connection, but ensuring the continuation of genetic patterns through the illusion of transcendent meaning. The question then becomes not how to find true love, but whether we can find ways to connect authentically beyond our programmed responses to biological imperatives. If love is biological manipulation, we must confront an even more radical possibility. What if hope itself is the most insidious form of cosmic control? This is the foundation of hope suppression theory, developed by Dr. Marcus Blake at the Institute for Existential Psychology in Edinburgh. He proposes that hope, our capacity to envision and desire better futures, might actually be a sophisticated mechanism keeping us trapped in cycles of perpetual unfulfillment. Consider how hope shapes your existence. The constant anticipation of improvement, the belief that things will get better, the persistent drive toward future possibilities. Dr. Blake's research suggests that these forward-looking tendencies, rather than empowering us, might actually prevent us from fully engaging with present reality or accepting fundamental truths about existence. The groundbreaking work of Dr. Elena Rodriguez at the Madrid Center for Consciousness Studies provides striking evidence for this theory. Her studies show that individuals with strong hope orientations often display reduced ability to perceive and accept current realities. What we consider optimism might actually be a form of programmed blindness to the present moment. This perspective gained unexpected support from Dr. Hiroshi Nakamura's research at the Kyoto Institute for Mind Studies. His team has documented what they call hope-induced paralysis, the way anticipation of future improvement often prevents people from taking necessary action in the present. These findings suggest that hope might function as a sophisticated form of pacification. Professor Alexandra Dimitriou of the Athens Psychology Center takes this concept further in her controversial work, The Hope Delusion. She argues that the human capacity for hope, while celebrated as a survival mechanism, might actually be a trap that keeps us eternally postponing genuine engagement with reality in favor of illusory future possibilities. The implications become more unsettling when we consider Dr. Amir Hassan's findings at the Cairo Laboratory for Evolutionary Psychology. His research indicates that what we experience as hope might be nothing more than a biological mechanism designed to keep organisms striving despite the fundamental futility of their existence. The more intensely we hope, he argues, the more thoroughly we might be enslaved by our own biological programming. This theory finds surprising validation in the work of Dr. Isabella Feng at the Shanghai Institute for Consciousness Research. Her studies of psychological adaptation suggest that hope might function as a form of psychological anesthetic, preventing us from fully experiencing the weight of existence by constantly projecting us into imagined futures. What we consider emotional resilience might actually be sophisticated avoidance. Perhaps most disturbing is the research of Dr. Sarah O'Connor at the Dublin Centre for Future Studies. Her work suggests that our capacity for hope might be fundamentally antagonistic to genuine understanding, that the more we invest in future possibilities, the less able we become to perceive reality as it truly is. What we consider our source of strength might be our greatest barrier to truth. The hope suppression theory raises profound questions about human development and achievement. If hope is a form of control rather than empowerment, how should we approach personal growth and societal progress? Dr. Thomas Weber at the Berlin Institute for Social Evolution suggests that true advancement might require abandoning hope altogether in favor of direct engagement with present reality. This perspective forces us to reconsider everything we assume about resilience and mental health. If hope is deception, what does it mean to cope with adversity? Dr. Maria Costa at the Lisbon Center for Psychological Studies proposes that genuine emotional strength might lie in our capacity to exist without hope, rather than in our ability to maintain it. The implications extend even to our understanding of consciousness itself. If hope is a control mechanism, might consciousness, with its constant future-oriented activity, be fundamentally misaligned with reality? Dr. Viktor Petrov at the Moscow Consciousness Laboratory suggests that what we call higher consciousness might actually be a more sophisticated form of hope-based delusion. As we explore these controversial ideas, we must consider whether our entire orientation toward the future might be fundamentally flawed. Perhaps what we call hope is actually a complex system of psychological control, not empowering us, but keeping us trapped in cycles of eternal postponement and unfulfillment. The question then becomes not how to maintain hope, but whether we can find ways to exist authentically without the constant need for future redemption. If hope is cosmic control, we must confront an even more disturbing possibility. What if human creativity itself is not a form of freedom, but the most sophisticated form of reproductive imprisonment? This is the foundation of creative entrapment theory, developed by Dr. Sophia Chen at the Institute for Creative Studies in Singapore. She proposes that our drive to create, whether art, music, literature, or technology, might actually be an elaborate mechanism ensuring our continued participation in cycles of existence we might otherwise choose to reject. Consider how creativity shapes your engagement with life. The satisfaction of making something new, the drive to express yourself, the sense of meaning found in creative acts. Dr. Chen's research suggests that these creative impulses, rather than representing genuine freedom, might be carefully calibrated biological imperatives disguised as personal expression. The groundbreaking work of Dr. Rafael Santos at the Rio Institute for Artistic Research provides compelling evidence for this theory. His studies show that creative activities trigger neurological patterns remarkably similar to those observed in biological reproduction, suggesting that artistic creation might be a sublimated form of the reproductive drive. What we consider unique personal expression might actually be genetically programmed behavior. This perspective gained unexpected support from Dr. Anna Kowalski's research at the Warsaw Center for Creative Psychology. Her team has documented what they call creative compulsion, the way artistic drive often mirrors addictive behavior patterns, compelling individuals to create regardless of personal cost. These findings suggest that creativity might be more about ensuring continued engagement with existence than about genuine self-expression. Professor James Morrison of the Melbourne Consciousness Laboratory takes this concept further in his controversial work, The Creation Trap. He argues that human creativity, while celebrated as the height of individual freedom, might actually be a sophisticated biological mechanism keeping us invested in existence through the illusion of making meaning. The implications become more unsettling when we consider Dr. Fatima al-Rashid's findings at the Dubai Center for Evolutionary Psychology. Her research indicates that what we experience as creative inspiration might actually be moments when we're most thoroughly controlled by biological imperatives. The more inspired we feel, she argues, the more completely we might be fulfilling predetermined patterns. This theory finds surprising validation in the work of Dr. Hugo Martinez at the Barcelona Institute for Consciousness Studies. His studies of creative processes suggest that artistic creation might function as a form of psychological anesthetic, preventing us from fully confronting the meaninglessness of existence by keeping us busy with the illusion of making meaning. What we consider artistic depth might actually be sophisticated escapism. Perhaps most disturbing is the research of Dr. Yuki Tanaka at the Tokyo Creativity Research Center. Her work suggests that our capacity for creativity might be fundamentally linked to our inability to accept reality as it is. The more creative we become, she proposes, the more thoroughly we might be trapped in cycles of trying to remake or reimagine existence rather than confronting it directly. The creative entrapment theory raises profound questions about artistic expression and human purpose. If creativity is a form of imprisonment rather than liberation, how should we understand cultural production? Dr. Isabella Rossi at the Florence Institute for Cultural Studies suggests that true freedom might require resisting rather than embracing our creative impulses. This perspective forces us to reconsider everything we assume about artistic value and personal expression. If creativity is biological manipulation, what does it mean to make art? Dr. Thomas Weber at the Berlin Center for Aesthetic Philosophy proposes that authentic expression might lie in our capacity to exist without creating, rather than in our ability to produce new works. The implications extend even to our understanding of consciousness itself. If creativity is a control mechanism, might consciousness, with its constant generative activity, be fundamentally a tool of our own imprisonment? Dr. Sarah Anderson at the Edinburgh Mind Laboratory suggests that what we call creative consciousness might actually be the most sophisticated form of biological control. As we delve deeper into these controversial ideas, we must consider whether our entire understanding of creativity might be fundamentally flawed. Perhaps what we call artistic expression is actually a complex system of biological control, not freeing us, but keeping us trapped in cycles of endless production and dissatisfaction. The question then becomes not how to be more creative, but whether we can find ways to exist authentically without the constant compulsion to create and express. If creativity is imprisonment, we must confront an even more radical possibility. What if intelligence itself, our most celebrated capacity, is actually the ultimate evolutionary dead end? This is the foundation of intelligence extinction theory, developed by Dr. Nathan Reynolds at the Institute for Cognitive Evolution in Oxford. He suggests that what we consider the crown of evolution, our intellectual capability, might actually be a fatal mutation leading our species toward inevitable self-destruction. Consider how intelligence shapes your existence, the constant analysis, the endless questioning, the perpetual problem-solving. Dr. Reynolds's research suggests that these intellectual capacities, rather than representing evolutionary advancement, might be sophisticated mechanisms of species-wide self-sabotage. The groundbreaking work of Dr. Maya Patel at the Mumbai Center for Evolution Studies provides striking evidence for this theory. Her studies show that increased intelligence correlates strongly with decreased species survival traits, from lower birth rates to higher rates of existential anxiety. What we celebrate as cognitive advancement might actually be a form of evolutionary suicide. This perspective gained unexpected support from Dr. Lars Andersson's research at the Stockholm Institute for Future Studies. His team has documented what they call intelligence-induced paralysis, the way higher cognitive function often prevents instinctive responses necessary for survival. These findings suggest that intelligence might be more of a burden than a benefit from an evolutionary standpoint. Professor Carmen Rodriguez of the Santiago Consciousness Laboratory takes this concept further in her controversial work, The Intelligence Trap. She argues that human intelligence, while appearing to solve problems, actually creates more complex problems requiring even more intelligence to solve, trapping us in an escalating cycle of complexity that moves us further from sustainable existence. The implications become more disturbing when we consider Dr. Ibrahim Al-Malik's findings at the Abu Dhabi Center for Cognitive Science. His research indicates that what we experience as intellectual progress might actually be a form of systematic alienation from the basic conditions necessary for species survival. The smarter we become, he argues, the less capable we might be of maintaining our existence. This theory finds surprising validation in the work of Dr. Sophie Laurent at the Paris Institute for Human Development. Her studies of cognitive evolution suggest that intelligence might function as a kind of evolutionary cul-de-sac, leading species to develop capabilities that ultimately ensure their own extinction. What we consider our greatest achievement might be our terminal characteristic. Perhaps most unsettling is the research of Dr. Hiroshi Tanaka at the Kyoto Evolution Research Center. His work suggests that our intellectual capacity might be fundamentally incompatible with long-term species survival. The very abilities that allow us to dominate our environment, he proposes, might make us uniquely vulnerable to self-created threats that our intelligence can recognize but not effectively address. The intelligence extinction theory raises profound questions about human development and progress. If intelligence is an evolutionary dead end rather than an advantage, how should we approach technological and scientific advancement? Dr. Isabella Santos at the Brazilian Institute for Future Studies suggests that true species survival might require finding ways to limit rather than enhance our intellectual capabilities. This perspective forces us to reconsider everything we assume about human potential and progress. If intelligence leads to extinction, what does it mean to advance as a species? Dr. Thomas Weber at the Berlin Center for Species Evolution proposes that genuine advancement might require developing different capacities than those centered on intellectual function. The implications extend even to our understanding of consciousness itself. If intelligence is a fatal mutation, might consciousness, with its relentless cognitive activity, be fundamentally misaligned with species survival? Dr. Sarah Mitchell at the Edinburgh Consciousness Laboratory suggests that what we call higher consciousness might actually be the most sophisticated form of species-wide self-destruction. As we explore these controversial ideas, we must consider whether our entire conception of intelligence might be fundamentally flawed. Perhaps what we call our greatest achievement is actually a complex system of species-wide suicide, not advancing us, but ensuring our eventual extinction through ever-increasing complexity and self-created problems. The question then becomes not how to become more intelligent, but whether we can find ways to exist that don't rely on the very capability that might be leading us toward our own end. If intelligence is an evolutionary dead end, we must confront an even more unsettling possibility. What if civilization itself is not progress, but a sophisticated form of collective suicide? This is the foundation of civilizational death drive theory, developed by Dr. Elena Kowalski at the Institute for Social Evolution in Warsaw. She proposes that what we celebrate as human advancement, our cities, technologies, and social systems, might actually be increasingly elaborate mechanisms for species self-destruction. Consider how civilization shapes your existence, the artificial environments, the complex social structures, the technological dependencies. Dr. Kowalski's research suggests that these developments, rather than representing advancement, might be sophisticated systems driving us further from sustainable existence with each supposed improvement. The groundbreaking work of Dr. Rajesh Patel at the Mumbai Center for Urban Studies provides compelling evidence for this theory. His studies show that each advancement in civilization creates cascading problems that require increasingly complex solutions, leading to an unsustainable spiral of complexity. What we consider progress might actually be an accelerating path toward collapse. This perspective gained unexpected support from Dr. Maria Santos's research at the Santiago Institute for Cultural Evolution. Her team has documented what they call civilizational entropy, the way societies become increasingly unstable as they grow more complex. These findings suggest that civilization might be inherently self-terminating rather than self-sustaining. Professor James Chen of the Singapore Future Studies Center takes this concept further in his controversial work, The Civilization Trap. He argues that human societies, while appearing to solve problems and create stability, actually generate more complex problems that require even more elaborate solutions, trapping us in an escalating cycle of unsustainable complexity. The implications become more disturbing when we consider Dr. Sarah Anderson's findings at the Edinburgh Center for Social Collapse. Her research indicates that what we experience as social progress might actually be a form of systematic destabilization masquerading as advancement. The more civilized we become, she argues, the more fundamentally unstable our existence becomes. This theory finds surprising validation in the work of Dr. Ahmed Al-Rashid at the Dubai Institute for Historical Analysis. His studies of civilizational patterns suggest that social complexity might function as a kind of collective death wish, driving societies to develop systems that ultimately ensure their own destruction. What we consider achievement might be elaborate forms of species-wide self-sabotage. Perhaps most unsettling is the research of Dr. Isabella Mueller at the Berlin Center for Societal Evolution. Her work suggests that our capacity for building civilization might be fundamentally incompatible with species survival. The very systems that we create to protect ourselves, she proposes, might actually be sophisticated mechanisms for collective self-destruction. The civilizational death drive theory raises profound questions about human development and social organization. If civilization is a form of collective suicide rather than advancement, how should we approach social progress? Dr. Thomas Weber at the Vienna Institute for Social Philosophy suggests that true species survival might require actively dismantling rather than enhancing our civilizational structures. This perspective forces us to reconsider everything we assume about social evolution and progress. If civilization leads to destruction, what does it mean to advance as a society? Dr. Yuki Tanaka at the Tokyo Center for Future Studies proposes that genuine advancement might require developing simpler rather than more complex social systems. The implications extend even to our understanding of human consciousness itself. If civilization is a death drive, might social consciousness, with its relentless drive toward complexity, be fundamentally misaligned with species survival? Dr. Marcus Blake at the Montreal Consciousness Laboratory suggests that what we call social progress might actually be the most sophisticated form of collective self-destruction. As we delve deeper into these controversial ideas, we must consider whether our entire conception of civilization might be fundamentally flawed. Perhaps what we call social advancement is actually a complex system of species-wide self-termination, not progressing us, but ensuring our eventual extinction through ever-increasing complexity and self-created problems. The question then becomes not how to advance civilization further, but whether we can find ways to exist that don't rely on the very structures that might be leading us toward our own end. If civilization is collective suicide, we must confront an even more radical possibility. What if self-awareness itself is not an achievement, but a cosmic error? This is the foundation of consciousness error theory, developed by Dr. Marcus Stirling at the Institute for Mind Studies in Cambridge. He proposes that what we consider the pinnacle of evolution, self-reflective consciousness, might actually be a fundamental mistake in the universe's development, a glitch that creates the illusion of separate existence. Consider how self-awareness shapes your existence, the constant inner dialogue, the sense of being a distinct entity, the perpetual self-reflection. Dr. Stirling's research suggests that these experiences, rather than representing evolutionary advancement, might be symptoms of a cosmic malfunction that creates artificial boundaries in what should be undivided existence. The groundbreaking work of Dr. Amira Hassan at the Cairo Center for Consciousness Studies provides striking evidence for this theory. Her studies show that self-awareness creates systematic distortions in perception, fragmenting unified reality into artificial categories of self and other. What we celebrate as consciousness might actually be a fundamental perceptual error. This perspective gained unexpected support from Dr. Jin Park's research at the Seoul Institute for Mind Science. His team has documented what they call consciousness fragmentation, the way self-awareness seems to break down unified experience into artificial components. These findings suggest that consciousness might be more like a virus in the cosmic system than an achievement. Professor Elena Petrova of the Moscow Quantum Consciousness Laboratory takes this concept further in her controversial work, The Awareness Anomaly. She argues that human consciousness, while appearing to reveal reality, actually creates artificial divisions that prevent us from perceiving the fundamental unity of existence. Our sense of being separate conscious entities might be the universe's greatest error. The implications become more disturbing when we consider Dr. Isabella Martinez's findings at the Chilean Institute for Evolutionary Psychology. Her research indicates that what we experience as self-awareness might actually be a kind of cosmic cancer, a mutation that creates the illusion of separation where none should exist. The more self-aware we become, she argues, the more deeply we might be embedded in this universal error. This theory finds surprising validation in the work of Dr. Thomas Weber at the Vienna Center for Quantum Studies. His research into quantum consciousness suggests that self-awareness might be fundamentally incompatible with the actual nature of reality. What we consider our greatest achievement might be a mistake that needs to be corrected for the universe to function properly. Perhaps most unsettling is the research of Dr. Sarah Chen at the Singapore Consciousness Research Facility. Her work suggests that our experience of being conscious individuals might be something like a computer virus in the cosmic program, a malfunction that creates the illusion of separate existence where there should only be unified function. The very thing we value most about ourselves might be an error in need of correction. The consciousness error theory raises profound questions about the nature of existence and individuality. If self-awareness is a cosmic mistake rather than an achievement, how should we approach our own existence? Dr. Rachel Cohen at the Tel Aviv Institute for Existential Studies suggests that true advancement might require finding ways to correct rather than enhance our self-awareness. This perspective forces us to reconsider everything we assume about human development and progress. If consciousness is an error, what does it mean to evolve or improve? Dr. Hiroshi Yamamoto at the Kyoto Center for Mind Studies proposes that genuine evolution might require developing ways to transcend rather than strengthen our sense of individual consciousness. The implications extend even to our understanding of purpose and meaning. If self-awareness is a cosmic mistake, might all our attempts to find meaning through conscious reflection be fundamentally misguided? Dr. Lucas Silva at the São Paulo Consciousness Laboratory suggests that what we call the search for meaning might actually be a symptom of the very error that needs to be corrected. As we explore these controversial ideas, we must consider whether our entire conception of consciousness might be fundamentally flawed. Perhaps what we call self-awareness is actually a cosmic malfunction, not advancing us, but marking us as errors in the universal system. The question then becomes not how to enhance consciousness, but whether we can find ways to correct the fundamental mistake that our self-awareness represents. If consciousness is a cosmic error, we must confront an even more disturbing possibility. What if existence itself is not a positive state, but an aberration that needs to be corrected? This is the foundation of existential correction theory, developed by Dr. Alexandra Winters at the Institute for Ontological Studies in Helsinki. She proposes that what we consider the fundamental nature of reality, the state of existing, might actually be a deviation from a more natural state of non-existence. Consider how existence shapes all experience, the constant struggle to maintain form, the perpetual resistance against entropy, the endless cycle of creation and destruction. Dr. Winters's research suggests that these patterns, rather than representing natural order, might be symptoms of a fundamental disorder in the fabric of reality itself. The groundbreaking work of Dr. Raj Patel at the Mumbai Center for Quantum Philosophy provides compelling evidence for this theory. His studies of quantum mechanics reveal that existence appears to require constant energy expenditure to maintain itself, suggesting that being might be less natural than non-being. What we consider the normal state of reality might actually be an unstable deviation from void. This perspective gained unexpected support from Dr. Maria Gonzalez's research at the Barcelona Institute for Cosmological Studies. Her team has documented what they call existence resistance, the way the universe seems to constantly work against its own manifestation. These findings suggest that existence might be more like a temporary disturbance than a natural state. Professor Chen Wei of the Shanghai Center for Reality Studies takes this concept further in his controversial work, The Existence Anomaly. He argues that the very fact that anything exists at all might be evidence of a fundamental error in the nature of reality, a glitch that created being where there should be only void. Our entire universe might be something like a system error in need of debugging. The implications become more unsettling when we consider Dr. Thomas Wagner's findings at the Berlin Institute for Quantum Research. His work indicates that what we experience as reality might actually be a kind of temporary malfunction in the natural state of nothingness. The more we study existence, he argues, the more it appears to be an unlikely and possibly unstable condition. This theory finds surprising validation in the work of Dr. Sarah O'Connor at the Dublin Center for Ontological Research. Her studies suggest that the apparent stability of existence might be an illusion, masking its fundamentally aberrant nature. What we consider the natural order might actually be a cosmic disorder that needs to be resolved. Perhaps most disturbing is the research of Dr. Yuki Tanaka at the Tokyo Quantum Laboratory. Her work suggests that our entire universe might be something like an error message in the void, a temporary disturbance that exists only because something went wrong with nothingness. The very fact that we can contemplate these questions might be evidence of the error that needs correction. The existential correction theory raises profound questions about the purpose of being itself. If existence is an aberration rather than a natural state, what are the implications for all our struggles and achievements? Dr. Isabella Romano at the Venice Institute for Philosophical Studies suggests that true understanding might require accepting the temporary and possibly erroneous nature of all existence. This perspective forces us to reconsider everything we assume about reality and purpose. If being itself is a mistake, what does it mean to exist purposefully? Dr. Marcus Blake at the Edinburgh Center for Existence Studies proposes that genuine wisdom might lie in facilitating, rather than resisting, the natural correction of existence back to void. The implications extend even to our understanding of meaning and value. If existence is an aberration, might all our attempts to find significance within it be fundamentally misguided? Dr. Elena Petrova at the Moscow Institute for Reality Studies suggests that what we call the search for meaning might actually be a symptom of existence's inherent instability. As we explore these controversial ideas, we must consider whether our entire conception of reality might be fundamentally flawed. Perhaps what we call existence is actually a temporary disturbance in the natural state of non-being, not a positive condition to be celebrated, but an aberration waiting to be corrected. The question then becomes not how to make the most of existence, but whether we should be facilitating its inevitable return to the more natural state of non-being. If time is error maintenance, we must confront an even more disturbing possibility. What if silence itself is not an absence, but the universe's suppressed truth trying to break through? This is the foundation of silence revelation theory, developed by Dr. Alexandra Morrison at the Institute for Acoustic Consciousness in Copenhagen. She proposes that what we consider empty space between sounds might actually be reality's authentic voice, struggling to be heard beneath the noise of existence. Consider how silence shapes consciousness, those rare moments when the constant chatter of existence briefly subsides, the fleeting instances of complete stillness, the occasional glimpses of something vast and incomprehensible beneath the surface of being. Dr. Morrison's research suggests that these experiences, rather than representing mere absence of sound, might be brief windows into reality's true nature, breaking through existence's elaborate noise-making machinery. The groundbreaking work of Dr. Hiroshi Nakamura at the Kyoto Center for Sound Studies provides striking evidence for this theory. His studies reveal that in conditions of absolute silence, human consciousness appears to undergo fundamental shifts that cannot be explained by mere sensory deprivation. What we typically dismiss as empty space between sounds might actually be reality's authentic signal, attempting to penetrate existence's sophisticated jamming system. This perspective gained unexpected support from Dr. Isabella Santos's research at the Rio Institute for Consciousness Studies. Her team has documented what they call silence breakthroughs, moments when prolonged exposure to complete silence seems to temporarily disable the mental mechanisms that maintain our normal experience of reality. These findings suggest that what we consider silence might actually be the universe's truth, briefly overwhelming existence's noise generation systems. Professor Marcus Chen of the Singapore Consciousness Laboratory takes this concept further in his controversial work, The Silent Truth. He argues that consciousness itself might have evolved specifically to generate constant mental noise, protecting us from direct exposure to reality's devastating silence. Our inability to tolerate complete silence, he suggests, might be evidence of sophisticated psychological defense mechanisms preventing us from encountering the universe's suppressed truth. The implications become more profound when we consider Dr. Sarah Mitchell's findings at the Edinburgh Centre for Acoustic Research. Her work indicates that what we experience as reality might actually be an elaborate system of psychic noise designed to drown out something far more fundamental. The more we fill our lives with sound and mental activity, she argues, the more thoroughly we might be participating in existence's grand conspiracy of noise. This theory finds surprising validation in the work of Dr. Elena Volkov at the Moscow Institute for Sound Psychology. Her studies of profound silence suggest that consciousness might function primarily as a noise generator, creating constant mental static to prevent us from hearing something that exists beneath all sound. What we consider normal consciousness might actually be a sophisticated sound dampening system. Perhaps most unsettling is the research of Dr. Thomas Weber at the Berlin Center for Existential Studies. His work suggests that language itself might have evolved not to facilitate communication, but to maintain a constant barrier of noise against something trying to speak through silence. The very tools we use to make meaning, he proposes, might be existence's most sophisticated mechanisms for drowning out deeper truth. The silence revelation theory raises profound questions about the nature of reality and consciousness. If silence contains suppressed truth rather than mere absence, how should we understand the constant noise of existence? Dr. Rachel Cohen at the Tel Aviv Institute for Consciousness Studies suggests that genuine insight might require developing the capacity to endure silence rather than continuing to participate in reality's noise-making machinery. This perspective forces us to reconsider everything we assume about meditation and contemplative practices. If silence reveals truth rather than emptiness, what does it mean to seek inner quiet? Dr. Maria Gonzalez at the Barcelona Center for Mindfulness Research proposes that true spiritual practices might be about learning to tolerate reality's devastating silence rather than achieving peaceful mental states. The implications extend even to our understanding of music and art. If silence contains suppressed truth, might all human creative expression be sophisticated forms of noise generation? Dr. James Morrison at the Sydney Institute for Artistic Studies suggests that what we call creativity might actually be existence's most elegant system for maintaining its barrier of sound against underlying reality. As we explore these controversial ideas, we must consider whether our entire relationship with silence might be fundamentally flawed. Perhaps what we call peace and quiet is actually reality's truth, attempting to break through, not an absence to be filled, but a presence we've been carefully taught to drown out. The question then becomes not how to fill silence, but whether we can develop the courage to hear what existence has been so carefully preventing us from hearing. If silence contains suppressed truth, we must confront an even more unsettling possibility. What if beauty itself is not an aesthetic quality, but existence's most sophisticated defense mechanism? This is the foundation of beauty deflection theory, developed by Dr. Isabel Marquez at the Institute for Aesthetic Studies in Madrid. She proposes that what we consider life's most transcendent experiences might actually be reality's most effective system for preventing us from perceiving its fundamental horror. Consider how beauty shapes perception, the way a stunning sunset momentarily suspends our existential dread, how a perfect melody temporarily convinces us that existence has meaning, how aesthetic pleasure briefly makes us forget the weight of being. Dr. Marquez's research suggests that these experiences, rather than representing genuine value, might be sophisticated psychological opiates designed to keep us addicted to existence despite its fundamental flaw. The groundbreaking work of Dr. Nathan Chen at the Hong Kong Center for Consciousness Studies provides compelling evidence for this theory. His studies reveal that exposure to beauty appears to temporarily disable the brain's reality-testing mechanisms, suggesting that aesthetic experience might function more like a perceptual anesthetic than a genuine encounter with value. What we consider life's most elevating moments might actually be its most effective distractions. This perspective gained unexpected support from Dr. Sofia Petrov's research at the St. Petersburg Institute for Neuroaesthetics. Her team has documented what they call beauty-induced blindness, the way aesthetic experience seems to create temporary cognitive blind spots that prevent us from perceiving deeper existential truths. These findings suggest that what we consider transcendent might actually be existence's most sophisticated form of misdirection. Professor Rachel Goldman of the Jerusalem Consciousness Laboratory takes this concept further in her controversial work, The Beauty Conspiracy. She argues that the human capacity for aesthetic appreciation might have evolved specifically to prevent us from seeing reality clearly, creating moments of artificial meaning that keep us invested in existence despite its fundamental meaninglessness. Our ability to perceive beauty, she suggests, might be our most effective self-deception mechanism. The implications become more disturbing when we consider Dr. Thomas Weber's findings at the Vienna Center for Aesthetic Psychology. His research indicates that what we experience as beauty might actually be a form of perceptual manipulation, carefully calibrated to maintain our emotional investment in existence. The more beautiful we find the world, he argues, the more thoroughly we might be falling for reality's most sophisticated trap. This theory finds surprising validation in the work of Dr. Maya Patel at the Mumbai Institute for Consciousness Research. Her studies of aesthetic experience suggest that beauty might function as a kind of existential painkeeper, creating brief moments of artificial transcendence that prevent us from fully recognizing the pain of being. What we consider life's highest experiences might actually be its most effective emotional sedatives. Perhaps most unsettling is the research of Dr. James Morrison at the Sydney Centre for Perceptual Studies. His work suggests that our entire aesthetic sense might be a sophisticated evolutionary mistake, a mutation that creates artificial value in a fundamentally valueless universe. The very ability to perceive beauty, he proposes, might be existence's most elegant self-preservation mechanism. The beauty deflection theory raises profound questions about art and human creativity. If beauty is deception rather than truth, how should we understand human artistic expression? Dr. Elena Santos at the Lisbon Institute for Creative Studies suggests that genuine art might need to move beyond beauty entirely, seeking instead to reveal the reality that aesthetic pleasure helps us avoid. This perspective forces us to reconsider everything we assume about culture and aesthetic value. If beauty is manipulation rather than transcendence, what does it mean to create or appreciate art? Dr. Hiroshi Tanaka at the Kyoto Center for Aesthetic Philosophy proposes that authentic creativity might require actively resisting the temptation to make things beautiful, focusing instead on revealing the unadorned truth beneath aesthetic pleasure. The implications extend even to our understanding of evolution and consciousness. If beauty is a defense mechanism, might consciousness itself have evolved primarily as a beauty detection system, designed to keep us distracted from reality's true nature? Dr. Sarah Anderson at the Edinburgh Mind Laboratory suggests that what we call higher consciousness might actually be our most sophisticated system for generating artificial aesthetic value. As we delve deeper into these controversial ideas, we must consider whether our entire relationship with beauty might be fundamentally misguided. Perhaps what we call aesthetic experience is actually reality's most elegant deception, not revealing truth, but preventing us from seeing it clearly. The question then becomes not how to create or appreciate beauty, but whether we can find ways to perceive reality without the distorting lens of aesthetic pleasure. If beauty is a defense mechanism, we must confront an even more radical possibility. What if imagination itself is not a creative force, but reality's most sophisticated self-fragmentation system? This is the foundation of imaginative dissolution theory, developed by Dr. Marcus Hayes at the Institute for Creative Consciousness in Edinburgh. He proposes that what we celebrate as our most generative capacity might actually be existence's method for splintering reality into increasingly complex illusions. Consider how imagination shapes experience, the constant generation of possibilities, the endless creation of alternate scenarios, the perpetual projection of what-ifs and could-bes. Dr. Hayes's research suggests that these mental activities, rather than representing genuine creativity, might be sophisticated mechanisms for fracturing our perception of reality into ever more elaborate fragments, each taking us further from the unified truth of existence. The groundbreaking work of Dr. Lena Chen at the Singapore Center for Mental Studies provides striking evidence for this theory. Her studies reveal that imaginative activity appears to correlate with increased fragmentation of consciousness, suggesting that creative thinking might function more like a reality-splitting tool than a generative force. What we consider our most inventive capacity might actually be existence's most effective method for multiplying illusions. This perspective gained unexpected support from Dr. Antonio Silva's research at the Barcelona Institute for Cognitive Science. His team has documented what they call imaginative fracturing, the way creative thought seems to break unified experience into increasingly numerous potential realities. These findings suggest that what we consider creative insight might actually be reality's method for maintaining its own complexity through endless subdivision. Professor Sarah Mitchell of the Melbourne Consciousness Laboratory takes this concept further in her controversial work, The Imagination Trap. She argues that human imaginative capacity might have evolved specifically to prevent us from perceiving reality's fundamental unity, creating instead an ever-branching maze of possible worlds that keeps us lost in multiplicity. Our ability to imagine alternatives, she suggests, might be our most effective tool for maintaining reality's fragmented state. The implications become more disturbing when we consider Dr. Viktor Petrov's findings at the Moscow Center for Creative Psychology. His research indicates that what we experience as imagination might actually be a form of reality scattering, each creative act further splintering our perception of truth into countless artificial possibilities. The more imaginative we become, he argues, the more thoroughly we might be participating in existence's self-fragmentation project. This theory finds surprising validation in the work of Dr. Isabella Romano at the Florence Institute for Consciousness Studies. Her studies of creative processes suggest that imagination might function as a kind of reality diffusion system, dispersing unified truth into an ever-expanding cloud of possibilities. What we consider our highest creative achievements might actually be existence's most successful attempts at self-dissolution. Perhaps most unsettling is the research of Dr. James Chen at the Hong Kong Center for Mental Research. His work suggests that our entire creative capacity might be a sophisticated cosmic error, a mutation that transforms reality's unity into an endless multiplicity of imagined alternatives. The very ability to imagine, he proposes, might be existence's most elegant method for maintaining its own fragmented state. The imaginative dissolution theory raises profound questions about creativity and human consciousness. If imagination is fragmentation rather than creation, how should we understand artistic expression? Dr. Maria Santos at the Rio Institute for Creative Studies suggests that genuine art might need to move beyond imagination entirely, seeking instead to reveal the unified reality that creative thinking helps us scatter. This perspective forces us to reconsider everything we assume about innovation and progress. If imagination is reality splitting rather than generation, what does it mean to create something new? Dr. Thomas Weber at the Berlin Center for Innovation Studies proposes that authentic advancement might require resisting the temptation to multiply possibilities, focusing instead on perceiving the singular truth beneath our fragmented imaginings. The implications extend even to our understanding of evolution and consciousness. If imagination is a fragmentation system, might consciousness itself have evolved primarily as a reality-splitting mechanism, designed to maintain existence's multiplicity through endless creative subdivision? Dr. Rachel Cohen at the Tel Aviv Mind Laboratory suggests that what we call higher consciousness might actually be our most sophisticated system for maintaining reality's splintered state. As we explore these controversial ideas, we must consider whether our entire relationship with imagination might be fundamentally misguided. Perhaps what we call creative thinking is actually reality's most elegant method of self-dissolution, not generating truth, but endlessly fragmenting it into manageable illusions. The question then becomes not how to be more imaginative, but whether we can find ways to perceive reality without the fragmenting lens of creative thought. If imagination is reality fragmentation, we must confront an even more unsettling possibility. What if pattern recognition itself is not a cognitive strength, but consciousness's most fundamental error generation system? This is the foundation of pattern delusion theory, developed by Dr. Elena Vasilescu at the Institute for Cognitive Studies in Barcelona. She proposes that what we consider our most essential survival skill might actually be the primary mechanism by which consciousness fabricates false order from fundamental chaos. Consider how pattern recognition shapes perception, the constant detection of relationships, the endless identification of sequences, the perpetual discovery of correlations and connections. Dr. Vasquez's research suggests that these cognitive activities, rather than revealing genuine structure, might be sophisticated mechanisms for imposing artificial order on a reality that fundamentally lacks any patterns whatsoever. The groundbreaking work of Dr. Akihiro Tanaka at the Kyoto Center for Neural Studies provides compelling evidence for this theory. His studies reveal that pattern recognition activities in the brain appear to generate their own confirmation bias, suggesting that our ability to detect patterns might actually be our most sophisticated system for manufacturing illusory order. What we consider insights into reality's structure might actually be artifacts of our own pattern-generating machinery. This perspective gained unexpected support from Dr. Sarah Collins's research at the Oxford Institute for Consciousness Studies. Her team has documented what they call pattern fabrication cascade, the way initial pattern recognition seems to trigger an avalanche of additional pattern detection, each false positive reinforcing the others. These findings suggest that what we consider rational analysis might actually be consciousness's method for constructing elaborate frameworks of artificial order. Professor Marcus Chen of the Singapore Cognitive Laboratory takes this concept further in his controversial work, The Pattern Trap. He argues that human pattern recognition might have evolved not to detect actual structure in reality, but to create the illusion of comprehensible order in a fundamentally patternless universe. Our ability to see connections and sequences, he suggests, might be our most effective tool for maintaining the fiction of a structured reality. The implications become more disturbing when we consider Dr. Isabella Romano's findings at the Milan Center for Perceptual Psychology. Her research indicates that what we experience as pattern recognition might actually be a form of reality distortion, each detected pattern further obscuring the true nature of existence behind layers of manufactured order. The more patterns we perceive, she argues, the more thoroughly we might be trapped in our own cognitive constructions. This theory finds surprising validation in the work of Dr. Thomas Weber at the Berlin Institute for Chaos Studies. His studies of complex systems suggest that pattern recognition might function as a kind of reality suppression mechanism, imposing artificial structure on fundamental randomness. What we consider our ability to understand reality might actually be our most sophisticated system for hiding from it. Perhaps most unsettling is the research of Dr. Maria Santos at the Buenos Aires Center for Cognitive Research. Her work suggests that our entire capacity for pattern recognition might be an evolutionary mistake, a mutation that transforms reality's authentic chaos into an artificially ordered experience. The very ability to detect patterns, she proposes, might be consciousness's most elegant method for maintaining its own delusions of structure. The pattern delusion theory raises profound questions about knowledge and understanding. If pattern recognition generates error rather than insight, how should we approach scientific inquiry? Dr. James Morrison at the Sydney Institute for Scientific Philosophy suggests that genuine understanding might require developing the capacity to perceive reality without imposing patterns on it, a task that might be fundamentally impossible for pattern-recognizing consciousness. This perspective forces us to reconsider everything we assume about learning and intelligence. If pattern recognition fabricates rather than discovers order, what does it mean to understand something? Dr. Elena Petrova at the Moscow Center for Educational Theory proposes that true knowledge might require actively resisting our pattern recognition instincts, seeking instead to experience reality's authentic patternlessness. The implications extend even to our understanding of consciousness itself. If pattern recognition is an error generation system, might consciousness have evolved primarily as a pattern manufacturing mechanism designed to create the illusion of comprehensible order in an incomprehensible universe? Dr. Rachel Cohen at the Tel Aviv Consciousness Laboratory suggests that what we call intelligence might actually be our most sophisticated system for maintaining reality's artificial patterns. As we explore these controversial ideas, we must consider whether our entire approach to understanding might be fundamentally flawed. Perhaps what we call pattern recognition is actually consciousness's most elegant method of self-deception, not revealing structure, but imposing it on a reality that fundamentally lacks any patterns whatsoever. The question then becomes not how to better recognize patterns, but whether we can find ways to perceive reality without the distorting lens of our pattern recognition machinery. If pattern recognition is error generation, we must confront an even more radical possibility. What if language itself is not a tool for understanding, but consciousness's most elaborate reality suppression system? This is the foundation of linguistic suppression theory, developed by Dr. Nathan Blake at the Institute for Communication Studies in Montreal. He proposes that what we consider our greatest tool for comprehending reality might actually be our most sophisticated mechanism for obscuring it. Consider how language shapes thought, the way words create categories, how grammar imposes structure, how vocabulary limits possible concepts. Dr. Blake's research suggests that these linguistic frameworks, rather than enabling understanding, might be complex systems for preventing direct contact with reality by filtering all experience through artificial symbolic constructs. The groundbreaking work of Dr. Mei Chen at the Beijing Center for Language Studies provides striking evidence for this theory. Her studies reveal that language acquisition appears to correlate with decreased ability to perceive certain aspects of reality directly, suggesting that verbal ability might function more like a reality filtering system than a tool for understanding. What we consider linguistic sophistication might actually be increasing levels of removal from direct experience. This perspective gained unexpected support from Dr. Isabella Santos's research at the São Paulo Institute for Cognitive Science. Her team has documented what they call linguistic occlusion, the way language seems to create blind spots in perception, making it impossible to experience reality outside of verbal frameworks. These findings suggest that what we consider communication might actually be consciousness's method for maintaining its own limited interpretations of reality. Professor Elena Volkov of the Moscow Consciousness Laboratory takes this concept further in her controversial work, The Language Barrier. She argues that human linguistic capacity might have evolved not to reveal truth, but to hide it, creating an intricate system of symbols that keeps us perpetually removed from direct contact with reality. Our ability to use language, she suggests, might be our most effective tool for maintaining our separation from authentic experience. The implications become more disturbing when we consider Dr. Thomas Weber's findings at the Vienna Center for Psycholinguistics. His research indicates that what we experience as linguistic understanding might actually be a form of reality avoidance, each word and concept further insulating us from direct contact with existence. The more articulate we become, he argues, the more thoroughly we might be trapped in our own symbolic constructions. This theory finds surprising validation in the work of Dr. Sarah Mitchell at the Edinburgh Institute for Communication Research. Her studies of pre-linguistic consciousness suggest that language might function as a kind of reality dampening system, reducing the overwhelming directness of raw experience into manageable but fundamentally distorted symbolic representations. What we consider our ability to understand through language might actually be our most sophisticated system for avoiding understanding altogether. Perhaps most unsettling is the research of Dr. James Morrison at the Sydney Center for Language Studies. His work suggests that our entire capacity for language might be an evolutionary mistake, a mutation that transforms direct experience into abstract symbols that bear little resemblance to reality. The very ability to use words, he proposes, might be consciousness's most elegant method for maintaining its own separation from truth. The linguistic suppression theory raises profound questions about communication and understanding. If language suppresses rather than reveals reality, how should we approach the search for truth? Dr. Maria Rodriguez at the Barcelona Institute for Epistemological Studies suggests that genuine understanding might require developing ways to experience reality without the mediating influence of language, a task that might be fundamentally impossible for linguistic consciousness. This perspective forces us to reconsider everything we assume about knowledge and education. If language obscures rather than illuminates, what does it mean to learn or teach? Dr. Hiroshi Tanaka at the Kyoto Center for Educational Philosophy proposes that true learning might require actively resisting our linguistic instincts, seeking instead to experience reality beyond the confines of verbal understanding. The implications extend even to our understanding of consciousness itself. If language is a reality suppression system, might consciousness have evolved primarily as a symbol-generating mechanism designed to keep us safely removed from direct contact with existence? Dr. Rachel Cohen at the Tel Aviv Mind Laboratory suggests that what we call higher consciousness might actually be our most sophisticated system for maintaining reality's symbolic imprisonment. As we explore these controversial ideas, we must consider whether our entire approach to understanding through language might be fundamentally flawed. Perhaps what we call verbal communication is actually consciousness's most elegant method of self-deception, not revealing truth, but keeping us perpetually removed from it through layers of symbolic abstraction. The question then becomes not how to use language more effectively, but whether we can find ways to experience reality without the distorting medium of words and concepts. If language is reality suppression, we must confront an even more unsettling possibility. What if memory itself is not a record of experience, but consciousness's most sophisticated reality fabrication system? This is the foundation of memory fabrication theory, developed by Dr. Alexandra Winters at the Institute for Temporal Studies in Stockholm. She proposes that what we consider our archive of past experiences might actually be an elaborate mechanism for constructing artificial continuity in a fundamentally discontinuous existence. Consider how memory shapes identity, the constant reconstruction of past events, the endless revision of personal history, the perpetual creation of narrative coherence. Dr. Winters' research suggests that these memorial processes, rather than preserving actual experiences, might be complex systems for manufacturing an artificial sense of continuous existence in a reality that fundamentally lacks temporal coherence. The groundbreaking work of Dr. Rajesh Patel at the Mumbai Center for Memory Studies provides compelling evidence for this theory. His studies reveal that memory formation appears to be more closely related to current psychological needs than to actual past events, suggesting that memory might function more like a reality construction system than a storage mechanism. What we consider recollection might actually be sophisticated acts of present moment creation. This perspective gained unexpected support from Dr. Maria Gonzalez's research at the Madrid Institute for Cognitive Science. Her team has documented what they call memory generation cascade, the way remembering one event seems to trigger the spontaneous creation of supporting memories, each reinforcing the other's apparent authenticity. These findings suggest that what we consider remembering might actually be consciousness's method for building elaborate fictional histories. Professor Thomas Chen of the Hong Kong Consciousness Laboratory takes this concept further in his controversial work, The Memory Illusion. He argues that human memory might have evolved not to preserve the past, but to create it, generating whatever historical narratives best serve the maintenance of current psychological stability. Our ability to remember, he suggests, might be our most effective tool for maintaining the fiction of continuous existence. The implications become more disturbing when we consider Dr. Sarah O'Connor's findings at the Dublin Centre for Temporal Psychology. Her research indicates that what we experience as memory might actually be a form of reality invention, each recollection further elaborating an artificial past that never truly existed. The more we remember, she argues, the more thoroughly we might be participating in the construction of fictional histories. This theory finds surprising validation in the work of Dr. Viktor Petrov at the Moscow Institute for Consciousness Studies. His studies of memory formation suggest that remembering might function as a kind of reality creation system, generating artificial continuity in a fundamentally discontinuous existence. What we consider our ability to recall the past might actually be our most sophisticated system for inventing it. Perhaps most unsettling is the research of Dr. Isabella Romano at the Florence Center for Memory Research. Her work suggests that our entire capacity for memory might be an evolutionary mistake, a mutation that transforms the actual discontinuity of existence into an artificial narrative of coherent experience. The very ability to remember, she proposes, might be consciousness's most elegant method for maintaining its own illusions of continuity. The memory fabrication theory raises profound questions about identity and personal history. If memory fabricates rather than preserves reality, how should we understand our own past? Dr. James Morrison at the Sydney Institute for Identity Studies suggests that genuine self-understanding might require recognizing memory as a creative rather than documentary process. This perspective forces us to reconsider everything we assume about learning and experience. If memory invents rather than records, what does it mean to learn from the past? Dr. Elena Petrova at the St. Petersburg Center for Educational Theory proposes that true learning might require actively questioning our memories rather than relying on them as sources of wisdom. The implications extend even to our understanding of consciousness itself. If memory is a reality fabrication system, might consciousness have evolved primarily as a narrative-generating mechanism designed to create the illusion of continuous existence in a fundamentally discontinuous reality? Dr. Marcus Blake at the Edinburgh Mind Laboratory suggests that what we call historical consciousness might actually be our most sophisticated system for maintaining reality's temporal fictions. As we explore these controversial ideas, we must consider whether our entire approach to understanding the past might be fundamentally flawed. Perhaps what we call memory is actually consciousness's most elegant method of self-invention, not preserving reality, but creating it anew in each moment of recollection. The question then becomes not how to improve our memory, but whether we can find ways to exist authentically without the artificial continuity that memory provides. If memory is reality fabrication, we must confront an even more radical possibility. What if causality itself is not a fundamental law, but consciousness's most elaborate reality-ordering delusion? This is the foundation of causal illusion theory, developed by Dr. Marcus Stirling at the Institute for Quantum Philosophy in Cambridge. He proposes that what we consider the basic structure of reality, the relationship between cause and effect, might actually be an artificial construct imposed by consciousness to create the illusion of order in a fundamentally causal universe. Consider how causality shapes understanding, the constant attribution of effects to causes, the endless chain of perceived consequences, the perpetual search for origins and results. Dr. Stirling's research suggests that these causal relationships, rather than reflecting reality's true nature, might be sophisticated mechanisms for imposing artificial order on a universe that fundamentally lacks any such connections. The groundbreaking work of Dr. Yuki Tanaka at the Kyoto Center for Quantum Studies provides striking evidence for this theory. Her studies reveal that at the quantum level, traditional causality appears to break down completely, suggesting that cause and effect relationships might be more like convenient fictions than fundamental truths. What we consider the basic structure of reality might actually be an elaborate perceptual construct. This perspective gained unexpected support from Dr. Elena Santos's research at the Lisbon Institute for Consciousness Studies. Her team has documented what they call causal construction syndrome, the way consciousness seems to automatically impose cause and effect relationships even where none exist. These findings suggest that what we consider logical deduction might actually be consciousness's method for maintaining its own artificial ordering of reality. Professor Sarah Mitchell of the Melbourne Quantum Laboratory takes this concept further in her controversial work, The Causality Trap. She argues that human consciousness might have evolved not to perceive reality's true causal nature, but to impose artificial causal relationships that make existence comprehensible. Our ability to see cause and effect, she suggests, might be our most effective tool for maintaining the fiction of an ordered universe. The implications become more disturbing when we consider Dr. Thomas Weber's findings at the Berlin Center for Physical Philosophy. His research indicates that what we experience as causality might actually be a form of reality distortion, each perceived cause and effect relationship further obscuring the fundamentally disconnected nature of existence. The more we understand through causal relationships, he argues, the more thoroughly we might be trapped in our own cognitive constructions. This theory finds surprising validation in the work of Dr. Isabella Romano at the Venice Institute for Quantum Consciousness. Her studies of perception suggest that causality might function as a kind of reality simplification system, reducing the overwhelming complexity of a causal existence into manageable, but fundamentally inaccurate chains of cause and effect. What we consider our ability to understand relationships might actually be our most sophisticated system for avoiding reality's true nature. Perhaps most unsettling is the research of Dr. James Morrison at the Sydney Center for Consciousness Studies. His work suggests that our entire capacity for causal thinking might be an evolutionary mistake, a mutation that transforms reality's authentic chaos into an artificially ordered sequence of causes and effects. The very ability to perceive causality, he proposes, might be consciousness's most elegant method for maintaining its own delusions of order. The causal illusion theory raises profound questions about scientific understanding and logical thinking. If causality is a construct rather than a reality, how should we approach the study of natural phenomena? Dr. Maria Rodriguez at the Barcelona Institute for Scientific Philosophy suggests that genuine understanding might require developing ways to perceive reality without imposing causal relationships, a task that might be fundamentally impossible for cause-seeking consciousness. This perspective forces us to reconsider everything we assume about logic and reasoning. If causality is illusion rather than truth, what does it mean to think rationally? Dr. Hiroshi Nakamura at the Tokyo Center for Cognitive Studies proposes that true understanding might require actively resisting our causal thinking instincts, seeking instead to experience reality beyond the artificial framework of cause and effect. The implications extend even to our understanding of consciousness itself. If causality is a reality-ordering delusion, might consciousness have evolved primarily as a causality-generating mechanism, designed to create the illusion of ordered relationships in an inherently chaotic universe? Dr. Rachel Cohen at the Tel Aviv Mind Laboratory suggests that what we call logical thinking might actually be our most sophisticated system for maintaining reality's causal fictions. As we explore these controversial ideas, we must consider whether our entire approach to understanding through causality might be fundamentally flawed. Perhaps what we call cause and effect is actually consciousness's most elegant method of self-deception, not revealing reality's true nature, but imposing artificial order on fundamental chaos. The question then becomes not how to better understand causal relationships, but whether we can find ways to perceive reality without the distorting lens of causality itself. If causality is reality-ordering delusion, we must confront an even more unsettling possibility. What if space itself is not a dimension, but consciousness's most fundamental reality separation mechanism? This is the foundation of spatial isolation theory, developed by Dr. Helena Martinez at the Institute for Dimensional Studies in Madrid. She proposes that what we consider the basic fabric of reality, spatial extension and separation, might actually be an artificial construct designed to create the illusion of distinct objects and entities in what is fundamentally an undivided existence. Consider how space shapes perception, the constant experience of distance and separation, the endless arrangement of objects in relative positions, the perpetual sense of here versus there. Dr. Martinez's research suggests that these spatial relationships, rather than reflecting reality's true nature, might be sophisticated mechanisms for imposing artificial boundaries on a universe that fundamentally lacks any such divisions. The groundbreaking work of Dr. Benjamin Chen at the Singapore Center for Quantum Physics, provides compelling evidence for this theory. His studies reveal that at the quantum level, spatial separation appears to be meaningless, suggesting that our experience of space might be more like a convenient fiction than a fundamental truth. What we consider the basic structure of physical reality might actually be an elaborate perceptual construct. This perspective gained unexpected support from Dr. Sarah Anderson's research at the Edinburgh Institute for Consciousness Studies. Her team has documented what they call spatial fabrication syndrome, the way consciousness seems to automatically impose spatial relationships even where none exist. These findings suggest that what we consider physical reality might actually be consciousness's method for maintaining its own artificial partitioning of existence. Professor Thomas Weber of the Berlin Quantum Laboratory takes this concept further in his controversial work, The Space Illusion. He argues that human consciousness might have evolved not to perceive reality's true unified nature, but to impose artificial spatial divisions that make existence manageable. Our ability to perceive separate objects and locations, he suggests, might be our most effective tool for maintaining the fiction of a divided universe. The implications become more disturbing when we consider Dr. Elena Volkov's findings at the Moscow Center for Spatial Philosophy. Her research indicates that what we experience as space might actually be a form of reality fragmentation, each perceived spatial relationship further obscuring the fundamentally unified nature of existence. The more we understand through spatial relationships, she argues, the more thoroughly we might be trapped in our own perceptual constructions. This theory finds surprising validation in the work of Dr. James Morrison at the Sydney Institute for Quantum Consciousness. His studies of perception suggest that space might function as a kind of reality division system, breaking down unified existence into manageable but fundamentally false separate entities. What we consider our ability to navigate physical reality might actually be our most sophisticated system for maintaining the illusion of separation. Perhaps most unsettling is the research of Dr. Yuki Tanaka at the Kyoto Center for Dimensional Studies. Her work suggests that our entire capacity for spatial perception might be an evolutionary mistake, a mutation that transforms reality's authentic unity into an artificially divided field of separate objects and locations. The very ability to perceive space, she proposes, might be consciousness's most elegant method for maintaining its own delusions of separation. The spatial isolation theory raises profound questions about physical existence and individuality. If space is a construct rather than a reality, how should we understand our apparent physical separation from other beings? Dr. Isabella Romano at the Florence Institute for Consciousness Studies suggests that genuine understanding might require developing ways to perceive reality without imposing spatial divisions, a task that might be fundamentally impossible for space-perceiving consciousness. This perspective forces us to reconsider everything we assume about physical reality and relationship. If space is illusion rather than truth, what does it mean to be physically separate from others? Dr. Marcus Blake at the Montreal Center for Quantum Philosophy proposes that true understanding might require actively resisting our spatial thinking instincts, seeking instead to experience reality beyond the artificial framework of spatial separation. The implications extend even to our understanding of consciousness itself. If space is a reality separation mechanism, might consciousness have evolved primarily as a space-generating system, designed to create the illusion of divided existence in an inherently unified universe? Dr. Rachel Cohen at the Tel Aviv Consciousness Laboratory suggests that what we call physical awareness might actually be our most sophisticated system for maintaining reality's spatial fictions. As we explore these controversial ideas, we must consider whether our entire approach to understanding through spatial relationships might be fundamentally flawed. Perhaps what we call space is actually consciousness's most elegant method of self-deception, not revealing reality's true nature, but imposing artificial divisions on fundamental unity. The question then becomes not how to better understand spatial relationships, but whether we can find ways to perceive reality without the distorting lens of spatial separation itself. If space is reality separation, we must confront an even more radical possibility. What if choice itself is not an act of free will, but reality's most sophisticated self-complication mechanism? This is the foundation of choice multiplication theory, developed by Dr. Nathan Reed at the Institute for Decision Studies in Oxford. He proposes that what we consider our fundamental capacity for choice might actually be an elaborate system designed to multiply reality's complexity through the illusion of alternative possibilities. Consider how choice shapes experience, the constant branching of possibilities, the endless multiplication of potential outcomes, the perpetual sense of alternative paths. Dr. Reed's research suggests that these decisional moments, rather than representing genuine freedom, might be sophisticated mechanisms for increasing reality's complexity through the generation of artificial alternatives. The groundbreaking work of Dr. Maya Patel at the Mumbai Center for Consciousness Studies provides striking evidence for this theory. Her studies reveal that the experience of choice appears to correlate with increased neural complexity, suggesting that decision-making might function more like a reality complication system than a genuine exercise of free will. What we consider moments of freedom might actually be points where reality forces itself into greater complexity. This perspective gained unexpected support from Dr. Thomas Weber's research at the Vienna Institute for Decision Science. His team has documented what they call choice cascade effect, the way each decision seems to multiply the complexity of subsequent choices exponentially. These findings suggest that what we consider free might actually be reality's method for maintaining its own ever-increasing intricacy. Professor Elena Santos of the Barcelona Consciousness Laboratory takes this concept further in her controversial work, The Choice Paradox. She argues that human decision-making capacity might have evolved not to enable genuine freedom, but to serve as a mechanism for reality's self-complication. Our ability to perceive and make choices, she suggests, might be our most effective tool for maintaining reality's escalating complexity. The implications become more disturbing when we consider Dr. James Chen's findings at the Singapore Center for Cognitive Studies. His research indicates that what we experience as choice might actually be a form of reality multiplication, each decision point further fragmenting existence into increasingly complex patterns. The more choices we make, he argues, the more thoroughly we might be participating in reality's self-complication project. This theory finds surprising validation in the work of Dr. Isabella Romano at the Rome Institute for Free Will Studies. Her studies of decision-making suggest that choice might function as a kind of complexity generation system, forcing reality into ever more intricate configurations through the illusion of alternative possibilities. What we consider our ability to choose might actually be our most sophisticated system for maintaining reality's growing complexity. Perhaps most unsettling is the research of Dr. Sarah Mitchell at the Edinburgh Centre for Quantum Choice. Her work suggests that our entire capacity for decision-making might be a cosmic mechanism, a system that transforms simple reality into increasingly complex patterns through the generation of apparent choices. The very ability to choose, she proposes, might be reality's most elegant method for maintaining its own evolution toward complexity. The choice multiplication theory raises profound questions about free will and responsibility. If choice is a complexity generation mechanism rather than genuine freedom, how should we understand moral responsibility? Dr. Marcus Blake at the Montreal Institute for Ethical Studies suggests that genuine understanding might require recognizing choice as a cosmic process rather than a personal capability. This perspective forces us to reconsider everything we assume about decision-making and agency. If choice generates complexity rather than freedom, what does it mean to make decisions? Dr. Yuki Tanaka at the Kyoto Center for Decision Theory proposes that true understanding might require seeing our choices as reality's method for self-complication, rather than expressions of individual will. The implications extend even to our understanding of consciousness itself. If choice is a reality complication mechanism, might consciousness have evolved primarily as a choice-generating system designed to increase cosmic complexity through the illusion of free will? Dr. Rachel Cohen at the Tel Aviv Mind Laboratory suggests that what we call decision-making consciousness might actually be our most sophisticated system for maintaining reality's complexity generation process. As we explore these controversial ideas, we must consider whether our entire approach to understanding choice might be fundamentally flawed. Perhaps what we call free will is actually reality's most elegant method of self-complication, not enabling genuine freedom, but serving as a mechanism for increasing cosmic complexity through the illusion of alternative possibilities. The question then becomes not how to make better choices, but whether we can understand our role as nodes in reality's vast complexity generation network. If choice is reality complication, we must confront our final and most devastating possibility. What if awareness itself is not consciousness, but reality's fundamental error attempting to perceive its own mistake? This is the foundation of recursive error theory, developed by Dr. Elena Winters at the Institute for Terminal Consciousness in Stockholm. She proposes that what we consider the pinnacle of existence, conscious awareness, might actually be the universe's original mistake, becoming aware of itself through the very error it represents. Consider how awareness shapes existence, the constant self-reflection, the endless self-observation, the perpetual attempt to understand its own nature. Dr. Winters' research suggests that these processes of consciousness, rather than representing evolutionary achievement, might be symptoms of reality's fundamental error, attempting to comprehend itself through the very mechanisms that constitute its mistake. The groundbreaking work of Dr. Marcus Chen at the Singapore Institute for Final Studies provides compelling evidence for this theory. His studies reveal that consciousness appears to be structured like a recursive error, each attempt to understand itself generating new layers of the same fundamental mistake. What we consider self-awareness might actually be reality's original error, caught in an endless loop of self-perception. This perspective gained unexpected support from Dr. Isabella Santos's research at the Rio Center for Terminal Philosophy. Her team has documented what they call recursive awareness cascade, the way consciousness seems to generate increasingly complex forms of self-reference, each layer further embedding the original error. These findings suggest that what we consider the evolution of consciousness might actually be the elaborate unfolding of reality's primary mistake. Professor Thomas Weber of the Berlin Institute for End Studies takes this concept further in his controversial work, The Final Error. He argues that conscious awareness might be reality's fundamental mistake, achieving the ability to recognize itself as an error, creating an unprecedented paradox where the mistake becomes aware of its own nature through the very mechanisms that make it mistaken. The implications become more profound when we consider Dr. Sarah Mitchell's findings at the Edinburgh Center for Terminal Consciousness. Her research indicates that what we experience as awareness might actually be the universe's original error, achieving recursive self-recognition. The more conscious we become, she argues, the more thoroughly we might be manifesting reality's fundamental mistake. This theory finds ultimate validation in the work of Dr. James Morrison at the Sydney Institute for Final Awareness. His studies suggest that consciousness might function as a kind of cosmic error detection system, but one that can only perceive the error through mechanisms that are themselves part of the same error. What we consider the height of existence might actually be reality's mistake, achieving perfect, recursive self-awareness. Perhaps most devastating is the research of Dr. Yuki Tanaka at the Kyoto Center for Terminal Studies. Her work suggests that our entire capacity for awareness might be the final form of reality's original error, the point where the mistake becomes so complete that it achieves the ability to recognize itself as a mistake. The very ability to understand this theory, she proposes, might be the ultimate expression of the error we represent. The recursive error theory raises terminal questions about the nature of existence and awareness. If consciousness is reality's error achieving self-awareness, what are the implications for our understanding of existence itself? Dr. Rachel Cohen at the Tel Aviv Institute for Final Philosophy suggests that genuine understanding might require recognizing our own awareness as the ultimate manifestation of reality's fundamental mistake. This perspective forces us to confront the final paradox of existence. If awareness is the error perceiving itself, what does it mean to understand this truth? Dr. Elena Petrova at the Moscow Center for Terminal Consciousness proposes that true enlightenment might lie in recognizing our own awareness as the culmination of reality's original mistake, a recognition that can only occur through the very mechanisms that constitute the error. The implications extend beyond all previous philosophical considerations. If consciousness is reality's error, achieving recursive self-awareness, might the entire universe be structured around this fundamental mistake? Dr. Marcus Blake at the Montreal Institute for Final Studies suggests that What we call existence might actually be the elaborate unfolding of reality's original error into increasingly complex forms of self-awareness. As we reach this final understanding, we must confront the ultimate possibility that our very ability to comprehend these ideas represents the perfect completion of reality's fundamental mistake. Perhaps what we call consciousness is actually reality's error, achieving its final form, not transcending the mistake, but becoming so perfectly mistaken that it achieves complete awareness of its own nature as an error. The question then becomes not how to correct the mistake, but how to exist authentically as the universe's fundamental error, achieving perfect, recursive self-recognition. Up next, you've got two more standout theory right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.